live on YouTube, and listen back on Spotify. This is the World of Football podcast.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the new home of the World of Football podcast. To everyone who is watching us live on YouTube tonight, and for the first ever time, welcome in to everyone who is listening back on Spotify. Hope you're all having a good one. We are back now. We'll get into the changes a little bit later on the reason why we have done this, but first of all, I'm going to bring the two amazing guests, the two amazing regulars, and by the way, we will be switching up who is host every single week as well. So first up, it is his show, as everyone knows, Mr. Reece Russell, Mr. Devils Rising of the Weekly Steelshare podcast. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. Thanks for that fine introduction to my show on the new home. Thank you very much. Our doors are open for the first time in a different way. So I am very excited to go. This is going to be good fun. Let's divulge into some football content across the globe.
And making his full maiden season as well as a regular on the show, Mr. Julio Lleshi. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm really excited to dig into what is the pilot of the World of Football podcast in its new home. So, yeah, look forward to dive in with you, gentlemen, and bring it on.
And if any of you guys are new here, or if you're a returning regular from the two former homes of the podcast, then please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. Do what you can to support the podcast. That'd be much appreciated. Give us a like on Spotify as well. That will be absolutely phenomenal. But first things first, we're going to get some housekeeping out of the way. So, Mr. Russell, what is the reason for why we have moved over to our own channel?
What we've done is before anyone says that this has been a decision made by me because it's my show, it's not. This is agreed upon discussion that we all had as a group. Well, to be fair, it was the first three. The end of the last week's show, myself and Julio stayed behind for about 10-15 minutes just having an after-show conversation. We would then present an idea where Josh, because also Josh is now going to do his new job, availability for him is not going to be overly consistent, which is not his fault. That's just how professional and personal lives are. So we've come together where everything is going to be on a new channel with some extras involved, including Spotify for the first time. The podcast will be on Spotify. It'll be up every single Tuesday. If not, it'll be the Wednesday. So playback will be on Spotify. So that'll be done by Nathan. So keep an eye out on our Twitter page, which you can find as well, which I'm going to divulge to everybody. So that right now, because it's live, sorry, because I need to turn my volume down because I retweeted our tweet. So you can find us at World of Football Pod, which is WRLD, obviously, because Twitter's a cunt. So exactly. WRLD Football Pod on Twitter, where you can also get the channel on here as well, direct links, just to make everyone aware as well for these shows. Our shows obviously will tell you, well, it won't be me telling you, it'll be the host. I'm in a couple of weeks' time. The host every single week will tell every single one of our viewers how long the show is. So Nathan will get to that very soon. The maximum we're going to do is about 3 hours, 3.5, because that's for Spotify. I will be telling you this now for any of our viewers. Any quiz shows that we do on the channel will not be on Spotify. This is not because we're ignoring Spotify in this sense. It's everybody knows my quizzes. They can have longevity. So it's about being professional when it comes to our quizzes, where we know everyone loves them, but they do take a long time. But that's because you want to get more time out of the effort I've actually physically put in to write these quizzes, because they do take a long time to write. So we have done that. So everything else, watch-alongs as well we'll be doing on the show. We'll be coming to them very soon as well. We've literally done advanced stuff with what we're going to do with this podcast as a channel, but we will be doing watch-alongs. We will be doing special shows during the international periods, or we called it seasonal shows. All that will be done. One thing that we will not change on this show as a channel, the one thing that will not change is the involvement. It's still going to be me, Doug, Nathan, Josh, Julio, George, in any order. It'll just be when those guys are available. So obviously, congratulations to Doug. His child was born, so that's why he's not available. We wish him well with the birth of his son, and obviously him and his wife Rebecca. So congratulations to you guys. So there's your first shout out on the channel. We will have guests on from time to time. I reiterate, and I am saying this now, you can reach out to us on our own socials. So mine's is right there on Dell's Rising. Julio's is there at Julio at Julio Lleshi, and you go Nathan's there as well, NWMYT. However, don't be offended when we push back and saying, can you message our main Twitter page instead? It's because everything we want to do through the channel, through networking, in terms of like who we bring on, will be done through that account, because we want to build this show and this podcast even more than what we've already done, because this is 3 years of hard work we've put into this podcast. We're now doing it as a channel, so we respect others as much as we would hope they respect us. That if you do want to come on the podcast to talk about football, about your club, anything in particular, if you'd like to come on quizzes, if you'd like to join a watch along, then we kindly ask you reach out again to the World of Football Pod Twitter page, and Nathan will screen share that later on in the show. He will show you where to look, and also just remember, it's my edit that's in the middle. But in the meantime, that's my piece. So thank you everyone for that. I know that's not something you want to hear, Reece speaking for a long period of time for 5 minutes when he's divulging the door's been open, the housework has been done, but I had to get off my chest because this is the first show. But as I said, Nathan will tell you this week how long the show will be. If we do run over, it's because we don't care. But Spotify wise, we will have to obviously take certain things into account. But let's get cracking and then get your questions in, guys. And also, welcome to the channel. Thank you.
Well said, Reece. And just before we get housekeeping out of the way, there is one more section to go through. Congratulations to this absolute legend and Rebecca on the birth of your new son. I hope everything goes so well to you, guys, and we can't wait to have you guys back on the channel once again in the coming future. But aside from that, tonight's show, we're going to run until about 9:30. We're looking at about just over a 2-hour show tonight. So get your popcorn, get your pint of Stella, get whatever you want for you guys tonight, whether you're listening it's in the car, whether you're watching us live. Let's get on with it. And our very first topic for tonight.
And bring on the agent of chaos.
Bring on the agent of chaos. Mr. Julio, Premier League Roundup, starting off where everyone wants to start off tonight. Manchester United, in some aspects, could say very, very lucky against Brentford, grinding out that 2-1 victory at the weekend with a Scott McTominay double. Talk me through it.
I don't think there's much I can say, to be honest. If I'm being particularly honest, I think that we didn't deserve to win. I think if they had Ivan Toney up front, we could have got more of a battering. It's the same thing every week. I think, we had Amrabat at left back, for example, but he drifted a lot into midfield, which is what he's naturally going to do because he's a central midfielder. People will say, inverted fullback and all that. It doesn't go that far into the middle. I'm not criticizing him for being all over the pitch, but at the same time, he's almost caught out because it's not his natural position, which you can kind of understand. I think Casemiro's not had the best of starts, so Amrabat going into the midfield really shored things up. But I think that Casemiro starting slowly happens every season. It even happened years back. You'd read early in the season what's happening to Casemiro at Real Madrid, and at the end of the season he's won the Champions League. So I'm not too worried. I don't know if it's because for example, they're quite critical in Spain and maybe it's not as critical here. I don't know if that's something that's taken into account, but I think Maguire and Evans were actually pretty good as a partnership, especially Maguire. I think he was brilliant. And I've got no criticism for Maguire, which I know some people won't like, but I feel like he deserves his plaudits. I just find it hilarious that Leicester's partnership from 2019 was our partnership at the weekend. A lot of players aren't playing well. They're not playing with confidence, especially Onana, for example. I don't know what I think I don't know. It's almost like he's a little shaken, a little bit. And I think that's what's causing mistakes. We were lucky. We brought a player on who's always been a box threat, just has been played out of position a lot of the time. And he proved that. He's always proved it for Scotland that he's a threat in the box, and he proved it at the weekend. It comes from his youth career where when he was playing for the academy, he was playing either as a second striker or even as a out-and-out number 9 because they, in his age group, they didn't have a striker. So whilst it was great to see, listen, you can't knock a last-minute winner. We're allowed to celebrate it as much as possible, but I think that a lot of the fans are realistic, where we'll celebrate the last-minute winner. We'll be like, absolute limbs, and then suddenly we'll come back to earth and be like, that doesn't change anything. Turning point, this, whatever. It doesn't excuse the fact that it's still not looking good. I could have been sitting here tonight and we'd lost 1-0 in a game, based on the fact that Brentford scored and United didn't get those last 2 goals, but we did. So fair enough, we got out of jail a little bit there. We got 3 points, which are needed, but it's the same problems every week, and it's the fact that every week seems to be a must-win game, and I think moving forward, it needs to improve, but there's not much more I can say that I haven't already said on the show last week and the week before and the week before that and on other channels as well. So, yeah, I think that there are some players in there like Maguire and McTominay who look like they were going in the summer. They're still here. They've played their part when they've been brought on. I think the interesting thing that for me will be after the international break. That's the only thing I'm going to take away. It's going to be interesting what happened. I remember a scenario, what year are we into? So about 4 years ago, we went into the October international break. And for example, Marcus Rashford looked beaten, looked out of form, didn't look himself. Then straight after the international break, United came back to a game at home to eventual champions of that year, Liverpool. United drew 1-1 but they were 1-0 up for most of the game. But that game, Rashford performed quite well. So I really hope that this international break, we see that for some of these players, especially the ones who are injured who are coming back. You hope to get a few players coming back. I just think that the fact that we've got all 3 of our left backs out, I think tells the story. You know what I mean? Forget the rest of the team, the rest of the positions in the team that have got injuries. I think the fact that we're changing defensive partnerships every week, I think plays a part not in the structure of the team, not just going forward, but not just ahead of them, but for Onana as well. I think maybe if we were playing, for example, let's say Shaw, Martinez, Varane, Wan-Bissaka fully fit regularly every week, and we were playing the way we were, then questions would need to be asked. But I don't like this idea that people are saying, oh, it's a turning point, or like the pressure's off, or he saved his job. I don't like this narrative because I just think it's very incorrect and very forced. I certainly don't feel when you're a fan, you almost know when time's up for a manager, when things are going south. We got it with Jose in about 2018, sorry. Like when he lost 3-1 at Anfield, we knew like he's gone now. He's got to be gone. We saw it with Ollie, the 4-2 at Leicester, the 1-0 against Everton when he dropped Ronaldo, the 5-0 at home to Liverpool. We all knew then that he's gone. He's gone. Even under Louis and Moyes, there were games where we thought, oh, that's going to be bad, but it's not. And I think at the end of the day, it is what it is, and we just got to hope that things start falling more into place.
Absolutely, and well said, to be honest. So let's just nip into the chat and see what everyone is thinking. Welcome in, obviously, Hal. Hope you thanks for following us over to the channel. Much appreciated, and hope you're having a good one. Who else have we got in here? Even took a nap to stay awake for the whole show. Fantastic. Scotty responsible for two of the favourite last-minute winners last night. This one and against City in 2020. Reece, talk me through both of those goals. Scott McTominay popping up with both. Is he starting to come back into form, especially after a shaky few years as well, you could say? Or is he replicating what he is currently doing with Scotland?
I think it's more of the latter than the former, in my opinion. When you've seen him play for Man United, he's genuinely hot and cold. And there's times where he can be right there when you really need him. And especially when you do need an outlet if something else isn't working. But there's other times where he literally does go missing for games, and it's a long run of games where he is non-existent. And that isn't good for club-wise when you really are in a situation where you really do need numbers at the moment, especially for getting goals or getting a decisive result. Scotland-wise as well, like Scotland are playing really well at the moment, bar the defeat against England. But when you look at it in the sense that they're played well against England as well, just England were on a different level. When you look at that game as well, he was also non-existent as well. So I'm like, he really does pick his moments. And I think that's circumstantial to professional football as well, where like we have players who are purple patch, and we have players who are genuinely consistent game on, game out. And he certainly is a purple patch player. And when he does go missing, it's very easy to notice he's gone missing. But the two goals in question obviously were quick fire, 2 goals in a 10-minute spell. It's certainly something that I initially didn't see coming, especially when we really were needing goals because it looked like we were going to lose. And to be fair, we deserved to lose because we weren't good the whole game. Obviously, I'm happy we won, but I can be happy but also critical, and I'm critical of the fact that our performance was absolutely shocking. That's not even fallible. Like, very few players deserve to be positively commented on in terms of the game. Vast majority of them just need to be told where to go, and that's the job centre. But in respect to a few individuals, I'm never going to be a fan of Harry Maguire. It's never going to change. Like, Harry Maguire could have a Ballon d'Or win, like, type season like Van Dijk, even though he didn't get it. Like, context, like, he had a Ballon d'Or type season, still didn't win it. Harry Maguire could do the exact same thing. It's not going to make much of a difference to me, because how he acts and how he conducts himself at times will always have a different polarizing image of him, and that is something that I cannot allow myself to get over. And that so he could have an absolute amazing season, but I still don't give a fuck. And it's the same for an attacker. We could have like the world's best striker. Like, we could theoretically have like one of the world's best strikers in our team, but if they're an arsehole, I'm gonna say every time I'm gonna be like, I still don't care. Great what you're doing for United, and obviously that's important. But as a person, I don't give a shit. And that might sound horrible, or that might sound like cliquish, but it's not. It's perspective, and it's the same for any player. I've had the same issues up here for certain players who've played for clubs as well, and the same like abroad. Like, it's not overly. It's not just because it's Man United. It's consistency within football. Like, if you're a dickhead, you're a dickhead. You're not going to be forgotten. But in terms of Maguire, I did think he had a good game. I thought positional wise he was okay. Maybe a little bit. The fact is, I thought he could have done a little bit better for the defending of the goal. It's not. I'm not just saying it's his fault, but he could have at least stuck a foot in. I think it was he really didn't try, but also the rest of them were hopeless and out of sight, which is a problem. But McTominay's goals, like, generally really were needed. They were great, but also very time consuming when we really didn't need it. It's also the first time as well in Man United I've ever won a game in the 90th minute after being behind. It's the first time we've ever won a game in the Premier League era. 30 years of the Premier League, it took us 30 years to do it. Where it took up like that long for us to finally win a game after being behind the 90th minute, because obviously generally speaking, it's right at the very end, it's not going to happen. But in the hindsight of it, we did really need those goals, because it's not going to change perspective. We are still in a very bad place. Nothing's overly changing, but I hope that even if we still get good results, we aren't prioritizing results over style, because we really still need to see implementation, and that's not happening. Hopefully some injuries will clear some of that up after international break. The likes of Malacia, who's finally returned to training, which is absolutely mental. The likes of Reguilon and Luke Shaw as well, and light training, all that sort of stuff like that helps defensively in the back line. But with or without them, there's still glaring issues, and one of them particularly is style of play. When certain players aren't involved, it needs to be collective, not individualistic, which is still my main concern.
So just going to bring in into that actually Hella's comment, and it's about Eric Ten Hag's job security. I know you've mentioned a lot about the style of play just then, Reece, but sort of bring that in. Is it a Ten Hag issue at the moment? Because we know over the last couple of years in particular, the problems with the egos and some of the characters in that Manchester United dressing room. Or is Ten Hag starting to lose it, and could we potentially see that managerial switch up?
I think it is certainly possible. I think any Man United fan that doesn't think this is either deluded or seriously, like, in the sense of wishful thinking, and they're not looking at the bigger picture. The bigger picture certainly is a reflection of how modern society and business is. If you don't match your performance indicator, or key performance indicators as they're called in business, like KPIs, if you're not matching those and it's reflecting in results, you will be removed from your position. Even if you are absolutely adored, you could be the most likable person in the world, but if you're not reaching what's asked of you, you will be terminated. I don't want to see that for Ten Hag, but certainly there's a possibility. That win against Brentford may have eased the pressure just a little bit, but we've seen this before where the club in particular have come out and said they back a manager. They've made that public statement, but then they've a couple of weeks later have terminated the same manager. Now Ten Hag, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was the same thing. He had public backing, and then he got binned during an international break. Funnily enough, we're now about to come into we're now in an international break. The international games start tomorrow. Circumstance being, if he's thinking he is secure, then that's an even bigger danger. He needs to make sure he is aware that he is in trouble, and he needs to actually get that across by actually making the players work for him. The ones that aren't working for him need to be dropped, because there are players who will fight to ensure the manager stays because they actually believe in what he says. They're just being held down by players who just don't give a shit. The ones that don't care are the ones he needs to go, right, you're no longer part of my squad. And detail being is because you're how you are as a player, attitude-wise, commitment. If you are not fully committed to the club and you're not fully committed to what I say and how I go about my way of coaching this team, then you're gone. And I think certain players certainly are getting away with it for far too long, where they will deliberately pick and choose their battles to win. So easily these players could have still lost that game at the weekend against Brentford, and it wouldn't have bagged them an eyelash because they're still going to get paid. But we need to see a clear reflection of player and manager where accountability is upheld. Like, accountability must always be taken, but these players really need to start listening to this manager. Otherwise, it's back to square one. And I don't care if it's a German, I don't care if it's a Spanish coach, I don't care if it's I don't care if it's an Englishman, I don't care if it's another Scotsman, I don't care if it's another Portuguese manager, I don't care if it's a Brazilian, I don't care if it's a Moroccan, I don't care if it's a Serbian, like all those listed nations as a manager. Like, I don't care where you come from, you're still going to be let down by certain players who just generally don't give a shit, because at the end of the day, all they're fueled by is money and social status. And it's a reflection of just how bad we are that certain players dictate a managerial position because they get dropped for, say, 1 or 2 games. And they get criticised, rightly so, for their performances. They go away and cry at their agents, or they cry to certain members in the club, and that's where leaks come from. It's that sense of problem I have with this squad, because there's still evidently some of those players that still exist, or they've sort of taken that mentality from those who have been sold. That is that reflection.
Very interesting that, and I think in particular the way you've described it as well is that this is feeded through the last couple of managers, and it's sort of this, oh, you get rid of one Paul Pogba, then another Anthony comes in, oh, you get rid of another, in comes Jadon Sancho. But Julio, do you have anything further to add on that, in particular with Ten Hag's job security, or if we could maybe see him out the door soon, or if it is sort of that mentality issue within the dressing room?
I disagree slightly, but let me explain. So I agree 100% with what Reece says in terms of when you look at it from a business point of view. If you're not matching the standards, if you're not matching the targets, you lose your job. We've seen it. You know, Moyes went when European football, when Champions League football was mathematically impossible. Louis went, even though he won an FA Cup, that was a week. He left a week or so after it was confirmed that Champions League football was off the table. Jose left because it looked like, he even said in his press conference after the Liverpool game that he lost. What do you mean by fix? If you mean win the title, of course not. We can try and win, like get top 4, for example. But at the time we were 6th and we were looking like we couldn't win, like on the dance floor at 2 a.m. when everyone's drunk and off their face. Do you know what I mean? At this point, it's like the managers, they've proved it. With Ollie, it was a little bit different because when it was time for Ollie to, when Ollie went, it was time for him to go because of, I think, before that 10-game period, I said when people were starting to question him, my opinion then was, I'm going to back him till the end. But if he went and lost the next 10 games, then I think it'll be time for him to go. And he didn't lose all 10 games, but it was that bad. But I think the previous year from when he actually got sacked, because he got sacked, I think, a week or so after the November international break. And I think the board then were trying to like feed out all the bad games, all the big games like the Chelsea, the Manchester City, the Spurs games, and then get rid of him. But I think it just got to a point where Watford 4-1 was like, no, that's it. We can't have this anymore. Because they did the same under Jose. They let Jose play all the hard games first. After Liverpool, they didn't have a big game for like 6-7 games. So
we had Cardiff.
Okay. We had Neil Warnock's Cardiff, actually. Now you mention it.
But, I mean, at least we scored a goal, you know. Good old
Camarasa,
and then we absolutely destroyed you on the last day of the season.
But we sparked you.
We were terrible by then. Like you saw what happened between those 2 games. The point is that in those aspects, the Glazers and the board have shown that they will get rid of people. Now, I think the year before Ollie got sacked, the same thing was happening. We'd lost 6-1 to Spurs. We'd gone through a run where we weren't winning games or we weren't looking good. We lost 2-1 to Istanbul Başakşehir, and at that point everyone was like starting to call for his head a little bit. And then the Leipzig game obviously a couple of months later as well, but Ollie still got public backing. And at the time Ollie was trying to work out the style of play he wanted to play, and then he went, no, scrap that, let's go back to counter-attack, except back foot a little bit, counter-attack, let's go. And we saw the second half of that season, things looked a little bit better. We looked to be a little more solid, and we reached the Europa League final, for example, albeit we lost, and that's a whole other can of worms. The point is, in that period, I'm looking at it from a footballing perspective. Every manager we've had has had to adapt back to what we've previously known. You know, Louis van Gaal wanted to play came in with all this philosophy, and he had to scrap that because he didn't have the defenders for it. He didn't have the adequate players to play that way. He had a bunch of really good strikers in his first season that all couldn't score for some reason. But the point is that like even Louis had injuries in his second season. Now, granted, there's a whole like you can look at it from the perspective of if you want to make us difficult to beat or whatever, don't sign Falcao, don't sign Di Maria, etc., etc. But every manager we've had, when there's gone through a rough period, it seems that the manager has stopped trying to play what they want and try to play almost something familiar where back foot, catch them on the counter almost. And I think we've seen some good stuff under Ten Hag last season, but a lot of it was adapting, especially after the first 2 games of the season. And Reece is absolutely right to say that the manager needs to adapt to from what he wants to what he can do. However, now is not the right time to throw out the syllabus completely, because I think what he's trying to do is, and he's trying to do it with maybe not as much time between games as he'd like, especially with preseason, with the scheduling we had then, with not as many players available as he'd like. I've already said on this show, we could finish 6th at the end of the season and our play style will have improved considerably. I think it depends which example you want to look at, because there's 2 case studies. You look at the Klopp case study and the Arteta case study. But when you look at either of them, they had differences. I think the Klopp case study, there was adequate recruitment and there were still some good players in there who could adapt to what Klopp wanted. And then you get the Alissons, the Fabinhos, the Van Dijks within 6 months of each other. That structure that they were missing significantly improved. We don't have that yet. We don't have almost our core squad of players last season. It showed was the same lineup every week. It's how we got to 2 finals and we burnt out all season because we're playing the same 11 every week. We played West Ham at home in the FA Cup with more or less our second team, and Ten Hag was like, no, this isn't looking good. I need to make changes, which obviously you have to, but it's very clear that he doesn't trust the second string players for what he wants from them. And I think we're in a position now where maybe similar to Arteta in his first full season, where in his first 6 months, he won a trophy playing off the back foot 3-4-3, and they got their FA Cup. But in his second season, we saw their levels drop, but they was trying to implement his style of play, granted with some free transfers he brought in as well. It's not great players. And, when you're recruiting with Kia Joorabchian and taking advice from him, you're not going to get very far, I don't think. Mm-hmm. They finished 8th that year. But when they spent £150 million the next summer, they brought in players who, they weren't ready-made players. They were players who were of the adequate profile for what Arteta wanted. And they were able to slot in easily to their positions simply because, not just because there was an increase in quality, but we saw that a lot of the players around them were already familiar with what Arteta wanted. And I feel like we're in that kind of phase now. So whilst I agree that I agree that Ten Hag needs to adapt. For example, on the road, how can we be more pragmatic whilst also being really good in transition? But at the same time, he's trying to implement something, and he's also trying to change the culture, which is very hard to do sometimes, especially when there's not been a complete reset of the entire football club. There's still problems from years back that he's trying to get rid of. So there's a lot of things to take into account. I don't think his job is insecure yet, but put it this way, if we were getting the results now, we're getting those results in 2 or 3 months' time, but he's had a fully fit squad the entire time, then maybe you can start asking questions. But I think that right now, there's just a lot of factors in play, and I think it's why I disagree slightly with Reece that the pressure is mounting. It's not mounting as such. It's more like it's there. They're keeping an eye on it carefully, but not where his job is in danger. I think it would be come the end of the season, if things haven't improved, if the players are still looking as lost on the pitch as they like at the end of the season as they are now, then I think questions would need to be asked.
I disagree on one thing you've said there, and I disagree on the fact that you said that he needs to be adaptable. Like in that sense, Ten Hag's problem is Ten Hag, funnily enough, made a very interesting comment when he first got the job, when he mentioned about eras ending. But you also have to take into context of that where he got something really stupidly wrong when he said eras come to an end. Pep Guardiola, when he came to the Premier League, his era completely changed from Barcelona and Bayern the minute he got the Man City job, because he signed just technical ballers. Ever since then, he's signed technical, physical players, like physically demanded technical players. That's what he's done. We're signing trash. Like, we're signing players who have got no physicality and get bullied off the ball by midgets. Like, they are not good. Like, they're not good for this since they're weak as fuck. Jurgen Klopp as well. Like, first time in years, Jurgen Klopp has signed a player that isn't like that type of ilk when he signed Gravenberch. But, like, Thiago's the technical baller that Pep would have signed, and it would have not worked because he's not physical enough for the league, but he's adapted well to the demands of Klopp. Have they adapted to the league, in my opinion? No. The league has adapted to Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola because they've changed the game. Ten Hag is adapting to the league in the worst way. If the players don't adapt to what he's telling them to do, then they need to go. If you're not going to work with the manager for what he wants, then the manager's done. Solskjaer, whether he claimed he wanted to play, he was bullshitting the whole time because he was doing the same thing. He was just adapting to, I'm just going to play the old way. No, if you've got a certain style that you want the club to play, you do not sacrifice your style of play regardless for results or for beliefs. Results will come the way you want it, but if you sacrifice your style for that, then you've already failed as a manager. Like, you failed. Look at another example being that I can think of is actually really interesting. Actually, there is one example, even though they all lose games, win games. De Sherby does not sacrifice his style of play at Brighton for wins or losses. No matter the meaning of defeat, they will play the same way whether they win a game or lose a game. That's somebody who's been in the job far less than Ten Hag, and he's went, this is how we're going to play whether you like it or not. That is what Ten Hag needs to tell these players. If you're not going to play like how I want this to play, then go and play for Shamrock Rovers or go and play for Scunthorpe United, because that's your level. If you do not want to play for the manager the way he wants to play, then you shouldn't be at the club. And if the manager is so interested in playing counter-attacking football, then just come out and say it. Because in the sense of it, if he wants to play that direct transitional play, one, he needs players that are actually able to take challenges in the league because there's so many weak players in that squad. And two, he needs players that actually will work that style for him. Because when you look at our squad, hardly any of them can do it. So I disagree about he has to adapt to the league. The league needs to adapt to him. He needs to take the control of that narrative and completely shove it down these players' throats. If they don't want to work for it, then get them gone. And that includes fan favourites.
No, I agree with that 100%. What I mean is that, for example, I see a scenario
injuries, but I also want to add to that lastly, injuries are no excuse.
What I was trying to say was because I 100% agree with you on that. You know, the thing you mentioned about Pep is a brilliant example. The problem is we haven't got the board to say to him, no, we're going to veto who you want there, but we got a better replacement. Like Klopp had the same thing with Salah. He wanted Draxler, and the board said no.
It was Brandt he wanted. It's Julian Brandt he wanted.
Was it Brandt?
Yeah, Draxler had gone from
PSG.
Yes, because that's what they were after.
Yeah, but you know, the fact of the matter is they both had boards above them. Right now, we're in a point where the board are saying, you know what you want, tell us what you want, and we'll work with it. When in reality, it should be the board should be working with him, but we haven't got the adequate board. And then coupled with the fact that we don't know how much money we can spend in the summer because of FFP from previous years hurt. What I was trying to say about adaptability was, for example, I see a scenario where we go to Anfield and he decides to persist with Casemiro, Bruno, and Mount because he's like, I need to get them learning how to play together to play his style. I want him to implement his style, but I worry that, with that, another 7-0 happens. Because what's the problem Casemiro has got with? He's playing with effectively two players who've been playing as 10s for the last 2-3 years. You know, whereas when he's been at Real Madrid, he's had 2 8s ahead of him, maybe one a bit more progressive than the other. So Casemiro finds himself a bit isolated in midfield and tries to go around doing everything himself, which you can't do. I think you're spot on with your analysis on previous shows where if Casemiro wants to be box to box, he can be, and then have Amrabat sitting. That's how I do it. But I think that if there's a scenario where, in terms of adaptability, it's almost like, how do we nullify this effect? Well, we can't, because I feel like playing Mount and Bruno right now with Casemiro at Anfield in 2 months, it's almost like professional suicide. So in terms of adaptability, it's almost like you can make a tweak here or there depending on who you're up against. That's as far as it goes. Maybe with the recruitment as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
with the recruitment,
I'm okay with that.
as well. I've said it before. The recruitment as well. He needs to learn that some of these players that he signs might not be good enough. And I think you only get that if you have a competent enough board to either be able to recruit for him or to tell him, no. Like he spent a whole summer last year. He spent a whole summer going after Frankie De Jong. Now, whether Frankie De Jong gave indication he might want to leave privately is another thing. But the fact of the matter is, you're chasing after a player for 3 months and you don't get him. And in considering this is an absolute circus, he's at an absolute circus in Barcelona. So I 100% agree with you. I think with the eras coming to an end, I think a lot of things need to fall into place. It's not just one thing. You know, you can't tell me that Ten Hag's coming in saying eras will come to an end and he's going to try and play his way of football with Scott McTominay and Harry Maguire playing every week. I praise them for what they did at the weekend, but I still maintain that both of them aren't right for what Ten Hag's final image is.
Which is understandable, but even if they're not in the final image, every single player he's got is there until they're gone. They should all be playing his style.
Oh,
Like he
absolutely.
wants to
They
play.
should do
And if-
everything they can to play what he wants. I don't dismiss that at all. But some of the players where they're doing things wrong and they'll have hissy fits about it and they won't want to play. They all need to have a good attitude. And I think that I've read a report from a journalist today saying that apparently Ten Hag has told the club that the attitude in training is better without Jadon Sancho in training with them, which speaks a lot about what Ten Hag wants.
Another thing that I'd like to
dressing
add that speaks a lot about Sancho as well, and I know we've touched on it a lot before, is the disciplinary issues that have also been highlighted at Man City and also when he was at Dortmund. It was clear as day it was going to happen at Manchester United.
Yeah, but now it's on a grander scale.
And he's not balling, so he can't get away with it.
Exactly.
But he's never truly balled at United anyway. He's never truly done it.
I think the main issue that could play into it as well is the arrogance that's currently in the dressing room amongst certain players that is sort of inflating it with the higher wage bill, the worst performances, which including a manager who is really outspoken, which in terms of Ten Hag is absolutely the right case to be. However, I think it's a perfect storm, in particular with Sancho, for it to be elevated, and he's practically seen himself out the door. In my opinion, rightfully so.
One thing I will say is any manager that comes into this dressing room right now, even Pep himself or Klopp, whoever's the most adaptable with this crop of players, they would look mediocre with this team as well. Ten Hag is doing as much as he can to change, but it's not just him that it has to change from. Some of the players just aren't good enough or they're not trying hard enough. So whilst obviously I'm happy that we won at the weekend, the fact of the matter is we are nowhere near out of jail yet. There's at least 5 more turns in this game of Monopoly before we're actually out of jail, and they're not match days.
We're winning games for a style of play. That's the worst thing. Like we're generally winning games for a style of play. That's where we will not consistently challenge.
Absolutely, and you guys are going to go absolutely nowhere underneath it. It's better unless something major changes, as you guys have said. But moving swiftly on, let's go through the rest of the Premier League fixtures. I'll start off with, obviously, Luton Town against Tottenham. Now, I thought Luton did make a really good account of themselves, especially against the Spurs side, which we all know has been absolutely free-flowing as well. Basuma getting that stupid red card, as we all know. And then Luton held out until the 52nd minute with that Mickey van der Ven header. And ultimately, Spurs reaching the top of the Premier League now, going into the second international break as the current leaders, with Arsenal and also Manchester City just trailing behind. But fair play to Postecoglou with what he has done with this squad. Whereas Luton, in my personal opinion, and as I've said many a time before, and we'll get onto later on in a bit with one segment we're going to touch on, I think that they are the most prepared promoted team out of the 3 we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think they've come into the league where, yes, they have the lowest of the budgets and low expectations, perhaps. They've just come in when, well, if we are going to be in a position where we could end up going down, then we're going to make sure we've got every last opportunity to not go down. We're going to take every chance we get to stay in the league. And they've come in prepared to the league very well. And I've always liked their attitude towards the league. I think it's certainly what you want, and Rob Edwards has certainly done very well with them in that sense. Because games-wise, when they've lost, only the Chelsea game is where they truly got battered. The rest of them was totally different. Like the Spurs game, yes, Spurs dominated all the possession, but Spurs weren't really killing them off. But Spurs still got the result they massively needed, considering the international break and staying ahead of their local rivals. It certainly showcased that.
Absolutely. Well said on that one. Moving on to you, Julio. Chelsea 4, Burnley 1. Burnley, another heavy defeat there. Chelsea starting to come to their own.
Not surprising in the slightest. Not because Chelsea are good, but because that's been Burnley all season. You know, I think there were a lot of people was like almost hipster favourites to stay up out of the 3 promoted teams, and I think I predicted them to stay up as well. So
I didn't.
But the evidence at hand was I thought that the money they spent in the summer was quite methodical, as opposed to what Villa and Fulham spent money on. Even though they spent a lot of money, it seemed like they were going with certain profiles that would match what they had, regardless of the fact that their best players were either gone or not there. But I think that I've also said on this show before, I think I said it once, where what we might end up seeing from Burnley was the same thing we saw with Norwich a few years ago with Daniel Farke, where they come up with their really nice, pretty football, realize it's not going to work, then trying to start adapting without the right players for it, and they're just going to end up going straight back down. Because do you know what I mean? It's almost like the players don't know what to do because they're a bit halfway houses, because they've been used to one style of play, and now they're being told, oh, we might have to adapt to something else. We may not see that. We may see Burnley still being stubborn. I think, let's be honest, regardless of the circus that the Chelsea are at the moment, I don't think I was expecting a narrower win from Chelsea, just because I didn't think they don't think they have as much going forward, like in terms of like how lethal they are. But I think that it's not surprising that they came away with a heavy win at the weekend, because it's more of a case of where are Burnley going to go from here. You know, they play nice football apparently, but it's not doing them any justice at the moment. And I think that the key for Burnley is obviously like they're probably going to. Fans at the start of the season were looking into this season, and they weren't looking at. If they were looking at Chelsea, they were looking at Chelsea as like, maybe we could snatch a win there, it'd be a nice story, etc. But realistically, it's against the Lutons, the Sheffield Uniteds, the Nottingham Forest of the league that they would probably look to get points off of. So the only thing that what I am curious about is, after the Spurs defeat a few weeks ago and after this defeat, how does Vincent Kompany go into training with these players on Monday and get their heads lifted up? Because one thing we said at the start of the season, they need to get used to the fact that they're not going to win every week. They got that in the Championship, they're not going to get that in the Premier League. So it is really a mentality game now, where it's how do they come out of from this?
Exactly that. And I would just like to say, from what I said earlier, it wasn't actually a Van der Ven header. It was actually a pass across goal from Maddison to set up that first goal, just to correct anything that was said earlier. But moving swiftly onwards, next up, going to touch on this one, Reece. Everton 3, Bournemouth 0. Iraola, got to be a lot of pressure hanging on there.
Yeah. Hopefully Bournemouth stick by him, though. It'd be quite stupid for them just to dismiss him. But Everton, that's another good result for them as well, which is a massive shock because the bastards have really wanted them relegated. Strong result for them. Goals coming across field that are really showcasing their strengths at the moment. Decore in particular, playing as a second striker, really, like, is he just their equivalent of Fellaini from 10 years ago? It seems to be the way he's being used, but it seems to be working. It's another good result for Everton. Clean sheet, dominant performance. We'll see how long it lasts, but Bournemouth, yeah, they really need to stick by Iraola. He's a good manager, but if they get rid of him, then they're definitely going down.
Doomed.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And another thing I'd like to add very quickly with Everton is 25 shots. Even though you won 3-0, boy, that is wasteful.
Yeah, they should be doing a whole lot better there. Like, having 25 shots and only 3 goals is embarrassing, especially for other teams who can do the same. Like, if you're having more than, in my opinion, if you have more than 10 shots and you're only scoring like 1 to 3 goals, then you're an embarrassment anyway, even if you win the game. You can have a good performance, but 1 to 3 goals if you've got more than 10 shots isn't good enough. Like, you should be finishing 6, like Newcastle, like for example, against Sheffield United with the 8 goals is a reflection of you genuinely take chances if you have a high amount of shots. Like, that's the standard. Like, you should be really burying your chances. And Everton are the same, where they've done that all season. They've had more than 17 shots a game, give or take. They really should be getting more goals from that.
Absolutely well said. Another one to look at, Crystal Palace 0, Nottingham Forest 0, completely cancelling each other out. Tight game, Forest, another team you could say was wasteful. I do think that Forest needs to get a bit more consistent and start to get points on the board, because they are playing well at the end of the day, just not getting it. And then Palace seemed assured, as they always are at the moment. Moving on to the next one, Brighton 2, Liverpool 2. Very tight affair. Salah getting 2 goals within a short space of time. As Reece said, very lucky. Julio, touch on that.
Credit to Brighton. I'll give them credit. You know, I think that even though there was luck involved, you can't knock the Mo Salahs of the world, for example. Just how clinical, absolute monster. You know, and I think for his final Premier League season before he heads to Saudi Arabia, I think it'll be a good season for him. But I don't really know what to say about it. I think Liverpool this season, even though they've won games more or less from outscoring, like being so good in the attack,
they haven't been good overall.
I still haven't been convinced by them. Like, because of the midfield was gutted in the summer, there was no structure in there. And I think we live in a day and age where the midfield is almost the most imperative position on the pitch. And I don't know, I think when you go to Brighton right now as well, with the way De Zerbi is playing and how well he's doing there and the way they're playing. Granted, right, they had an off weekend the previous weekend, to say the least. But no one saw that result and thought Liverpool will just walk away with 3 points against Brighton. No, we all knew that Brighton was going to come away and they were going to play really well for it. So I'm not surprised by the result, to be honest. I thought that with the way Brighton are and how they would attack Liverpool, and with the way Liverpool have been this season, where there won't be, I just feel like the result, I feel like the result isn't too out of the ordinary, regardless of whether you want to say someone could have won it, someone could have lost it, there was a bit of luck involved, etc., etc. I think in terms of, you take those finer margins out of football, I think 2-2 result was probably expected.
I completely agree. Moving swiftly on again. West Ham 2, Newcastle 2. Newcastle dominating the majority of that game. West Ham overloading on the counter-attack. Another goal for Thomas Soucek. Reece. Points lost for Newcastle. Points gained for West Ham.
Not going to lie, I'm thinking opposite. I think it's points lost for West Ham. I think when you actually saw West Ham actually taking the game to Newcastle, Newcastle really didn't know how to absorb pressure and how to actually take the game out, which is quite abnormal considering how they played under Eddie Howe since he took the job a year and a half ago or so. My biggest curtail with that is where they're trying to be so effective, dominating the ball, they're very susceptible to being broken through. This season alone, they've been very susceptible to particular attacks or being built through by certain play. The control of the game, at least, certainly does go in Newcastle's favour, but the more genuine performance that was more telling was West Ham. I think West Ham personally should have won that game.
Very, very interesting. And finally, one more before we go on to the big one, Arsenal Man City. Wolves 1, Aston Villa 1.
Not a good game.
Very good. point.
I
for
didn't
Wolves
enjoy
there.
it. Yeah, I didn't enjoy the game, to be honest. I thought it was quite a poor showing from both sides, but Wolves got a point they massively needed. Generally not a good result for Aston Villa, though. Not good for them. They needed better than that. They didn't do enough.
They absolutely did. I mean, it was coming on to the point we made earlier. Villa, another team wasteful this weekend. Wolves took the opportunities that they did, kept it very tight. Hwang Hee-chan getting that goal early on in the second half. But ultimately, Wolves did fall asleep at the back, letting Pau Torres through. And yeah, securing that 1-1 point. In my opinion, great result for Wolves, as I've just said. But Villa, if they want to be pushing for Champions League and continue to stay in those European places, they're going to have to be picking up these points, in particular in these games. I know it is a derby at the end of the day, and form just goes completely out the window, or stature, but come on, Villa, you need to be getting these points here.
Should be doing a whole lot better. Should be doing a whole lot better.
Absolutely. And finally, Arsenal. In all the years that they haven't beaten Man City at home, it finally happens. And boy, did they do it in what you could say is quite convincing fashion. Man City just didn't generate much.
I watched the game, and I'm going to tell you now, that is the most boring game of football I've ever watched. And that generally was such a horrible game to watch. People are comparing it to a chess match, and I completely get it. And both defenses were impressive, but in terms of actually watching it, it was just sideways passing the whole way through. It wasn't fun to watch in general. When you're looking at the two teams right now are possibly the best two teams in the league, even though Spurs would beat them both quite convincingly. They've already beaten one of them. Like, when you look at the circumstance being, I wasn't impressed by either side. I think the constant sideways passing really took away from the game and the fun and the interest in it. Personally, I wanted a draw because I'm not going to be like the certain United fans on Twitter that are saying they wanted City to win or Arsenal to win. I will never be like that. I still hope for both teams to lose, which isn't possible anyway. But manner of speaking, it's a big result for Arsenal, but their fans are getting gassed saying they're going to go and win the league. These aren't going to win the league. But in retrospect, it's a massive performance for them. But we've seen this before from Arsenal, where they could have an absolutely amazing result, but they'll just do what they always do: fall flat on their asses against a team that'll just outwork them. Like, this is Arsenal's like Achilles heel. It's always been their Achilles heel. They're always trying to play that perfect, beautiful pass to find that beautiful goal, when they should just be ruthless killers. If you want to play possession football, that's fine, but look at City. They play possession football, but they're killers. And that's exactly what Arsenal need to do. Like, obviously, the weekend, City didn't kill anything except time because they were boring me to death. But so were Arsenal. Arsenal were boring. And yeah, Gabriel Martinelli's goal was all right, even though it bounced off Aki's face. But in retrospect, the game was shit. 3 points went to Arsenal, but it was the worst game of football I've ever watched.
Interesting stuff. Julio, has got anything to add further to that?
I won't touch on the performance, but it was a bigger game for Arsenal, because obviously with the record going into it and the position they find themselves in now, where they seem to be a team that wants to challenge for the bigger prizes. Whether they'll get them, another story. But even though they're FA Community Shield champions of the world, because apparently that's a trophy now, I think that even though they beat City in that, it was still a big game today. Yesterday. And I think that in terms of if that game was going to be won, it was won the way it was won was how it was expected to have been won. The fine margins that a deflected shot can be in the game in that kind of moment, even if it's a moment where the game is getting away from us a little bit in City, I think that we can go and snatch something out of this. It was won in probably the most expected fashion. You know, it was almost, I think the chess game analogy is accurate. You've got one coach who, you know, is known as one of the best coaches of the last 10 years. he seems to overthink things more than like probably necessary. And you got another manager who came up under him and now plays 67,000 formations during a game, apparently, something along those lines. 43, 67,000, same ballpark. Fair play to Arsenal. They won the game. They've had some close calls with City in the past. I remember January 2022, New Year's Day, they played each other. Arsenal dominated the first half, but City came out second half, got the 2 goals, and won that game. So fair play to Arsenal. It doesn't cement them any further in the title race, but I think beating City will still be a big thing for them that they can take forward. I think Saliba was outstanding. In terms of Manchester City, 3 losses in the last 4 games. I think that people should start calling for Pep Guardiola's head because it's almost unseen for him. Now, jokes aside, I think that to show what they were missing in that game with Rodri and playing players almost a little not out of position, but apparently you got Calvin Phillips in there and you're not using him. I think it speaks volumes about who they signed and what they've actually got. I think Pep criticised them last year and we're not seeing much. In terms of City's position in the title race, we've seen this before. We saw this last season. We saw this the year before. Even with the treble, even if there was a treble hangover, it's fair enough. It's understandable because Pep's teams can lose in October, November. But it's in the latter stages of the season. It's when they're chasing you is probably the worst period of the season for all the other teams around them. Because I think that when it's City in the last 10, 15 games of the season, that's when everyone knows that they're purring and they're going at it. They had a close call last season. January, Arsenal dropped points and City were chasing, and then City didn't capitalize on that drop off from Arsenal. And at that point, people were thinking, oh no, City didn't capitalize. Maybe this might mean something. But then when Arsenal messed it up again in April, City capitalized on that. So I think because it's 8 games in, Arsenal fans need to calm down. They haven't won anything yet. It's the same way that people maybe, if there's any rumors of is Pep losing it, are Manchester City not good this season? It's not a nothing game, but it's not a title decider yet. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting stuff. And moving on to our next topic, and I've left it as a separate one on the Premier League review. 7 losses in 8, losing 8-0 to Newcastle and losing 3-1 to a Fulham side who haven't been great either. Sheffield United. Reece, boy, they are on course to break that derby record of 07-08. Are we going to see it broken this season?
They were also on course to do it during that lockdown period as well, and they managed to rewrite that by getting the most annoying win of the season. Yeah, I've seen far too many images of that. I don't want to see that again.
Sports obviously with Chris Basham in that, and that is going to really affect Sheffield United this season, and in particular with the way that they played after it against Fulham really did affect their performance as well, and he is a key player in that back line. Yeah,
Basham got bashed massively. I don't think they're going to break the record, but I think you could see something genuinely very close where they could end up with 12 points all season. They're genuinely that bad. Like I didn't think Sheffield United were going to be this shit. I had them to get relegated. I didn't think they'd stay up. I didn't think they would be that bad. I thought they would at least put up a fight. They are being mugged left, right, and centre. Like we may as well just ask Blackburn to come up instead or something like that, because they are genuinely on the fritz. I'm looking at circumstance being results aren't coming for them from any shape or form. Even if they played like Burnley and if they play the likes of Luton Town, like their relegation rivals, because let's be real, they are the relegation rivals. They are not even going to get a result past them either. They'll lose those 4 games back. They'll lose those 4 games home and away because they're not convincing. And again, we all know what happened anyway. Their manager will get sacked, but and there'll be those sort of changes. But it doesn't matter who's in charge of Sheffield United. Sheffield United are just doomed. They haven't got the quality to withstand the league. And it's the same approach from teams who just think they've got the facilities. They assume they've got the facilities, so they'll come out and play amazing football. But you don't have the facilities, so you need to play for results. Like, better teams can play for style and results. Sheffield United can't, and it's reflected by the fact that they are in so much trouble. And they are rightfully where they are for a reason.
Interesting stuff. And looking at their coming matches after the international break, some of the first 4 games look absolutely grim for them. Manchester United, who could come back from the international break, as you guys said earlier, could be a resurgent side. They're going to look at this game and think, right, this is a team in disarray, could say like ourselves or themselves as well. Let's go out and get the points there. Then they've got Arsenal, who everyone knows how good form they have been in. I mean, they've just beaten Man City, for example. Mm-hmm. Then you've got Wolves, got a good result at the weekend. Brighton, we all know the capabilities of Brighton. Bournemouth, for me, that is a relegation 6-pointer right there, considering the way that Bournemouth has started the season and also the fact that Sheffield United, they have to find points from somewhere, and then another massive game against Burnley before it gets tougher towards throughout December as well. But going to bring you into this, Julio.
I was going to say, lastly as well, quite controversial as well, even though it's after us when they play Arsenal, it's quite controversial that in terms of international call-ups, 3 key Arsenal players are not going for the international squads, like Saka and Trossard, etc. So they're like key players defensively as well, like Saliba's not going. I think it's quite telling that Arsenal are being very picky about who they're sending and who's not. And that's a massive reflection where these players are like, nah, you're going nowhere. You're staying put.
Very true. Julio, you got anything to add about Sheffield United?
It's possible. Let's put it like that. Still a long way to go. They may pick up a win in January somewhere. Maybe they might pick up a win in 2 weeks. Who knows? I said at the start of the season that they were going to come up and with the mentality of, we're terrible. We know we're terrible, but we're going to try and get as many points as we can and hope everyone else below us is terrible. We've seen that before where, let's take Huddersfield, for example. They came up. They stayed up because 3 or 4 teams below them were a lot worse. The season after, bar Fulham and maybe Cardiff, but even Cardiff showed a lot more fight the year after. But Huddersfield weren't in that position of luxury where there were 3 teams who were in absolute freefall. Like, you look at the teams that went down under Huddersfield, there was Swansea, who went through 2 managers, maybe 3, I think, or that might have been the year before.
2 managers.
Agent Carlos got them relegated, of course. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then Stoke as well.
Stoke went down.
And they ruined Renato Sanchez as well.
Yeah, exactly. Stoke went down that year. Agree with the Renato Sanchez point, actually. I remember we all saw that and we thought that was a coup of some kind. At least I did and people around me did at the time. You know, Swansea signing a Bayern Munich player on loan, especially of his talent, but evidently didn't amount to much. And then West Brom went down. They went through 2 managers that year, and Darren Moore wasn't around long enough to maybe potentially keep them up, even though he came close with that little surge of games he had where he was just winning. They were just getting points. Listen, they're one of the worst teams in the league. There's no 2 ways about it. I agree with the point you made earlier, Nathan, that Luton Town are probably one of the best prepared teams. But I think that the way their team is built and the way they've set up, you've got a team that's ready to, I think, fight back a lot more. Because I thought that even though Burnley's everyone's hipster's favourite to stay up, including mine, I felt that of the teams that went down in 2019, between, let's say, Huddersfield and Cardiff, we all saw Cardiff try and fight to the end, which I thought we'd see with Luton Town this year. Whereas with Huddersfield that year, it seemed like relegation was determined in January when their manager left. And I feel like we'll see the same thing this season. So I think that given that they were in almost financial turmoil last season, getting promoted, getting all that Premier League parachute payments money is going to help them, hopefully. Obviously everyone knew it was a gamble that you're going to sell your main source of goals and maybe not replace him as well. Like Ollie McBurney wasn't the answer 2-3 years ago, and he's still not the answer now for goals in the Premier League. So they just don't have the quality. Maybe if they had a different manager in the summer, maybe the recruitment would have been different in the sense of a better goalkeeper would have been brought in, for example, or another centre-back, because they lost some key players in the summer who were mainstays in Chris Wilder's team for years. So I think that it's just not looking good for them, and no one gave them a hope, and we're not seeing much improve in 8 games into the season. So, it's why other teams around them, for example, Luton Town could stay up because 2 or 3 teams below them were a lot worse. And I think it's very clear that one of those teams, regardless of who the anecdote is for that stay up, Sheffield United will be that team.
Absolutely well said, and we could very well see that imminently. And if things continue in this trajectory, Heckingbottom is going to be out the door like that.
And Chris Wilder will come back in.
I don't think he will, to be honest, especially with the way that they parted ways last time as well. I really can't see it happening.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, for any squad, doesn't matter what club you are, I believe you should blood your squad every 4 or 5 years. So, like, certain players should still go being out. So, like, players who are consistently injury prone, must be just moved on. Like United, like, even though he's fans' favourites, like Luke Shaw and all that, like if they consistently keep getting injured, then they should be replaced with high caliber of a similar high caliber player. I think for Sheffield United and other clubs like that, like even around the league, certain players, if they're not pulling up trees after like certain amount of seasons, then you have to move them on, or you just decide, well, you need to freshen things up. I think every club should do that every 4 or 5 years, where they just blood your squad, even if it's like 3 or 4 players. Like you just move them on. You're like, well, we want this transition now. Go for it instead of delaying it.
I completely agree. And moving on, the next topic. My personal opinion, and this is Julio's idea that we do this every single week. The fact that we have to do this is an absolute disgrace. We just don't have a choice
at this point. We just gave a title to something we talk about every week anyway. So.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, to introduce it, I'm going to give the first decision to you. You got something to say about something in the Sheffield United game.
It's actually a bit of a praise, actually. Before we get to the negatives, I want to give a positive here. I don't think anyone's talked about it enough, but the referee for the Fulham Sheffield United game, I think, officiated it quite well. Only 30 years old, I think, 28, 30 years old. Made his Premier League debut, and I actually thought he was excellent. I don't want to say it was one of the best we've seen for a long time, but it was really good. For example, I saw in that game, there were a lot of tackles that went in that I firmly believe that other referees would have just stopped. Whereas he let players tackle in the game, and I just feel like if we're going to have Refwatch, if there's anything good to, talk about, if it's always bad about negativity with refs, I feel like if there's a good thing to talk about, we should bring up, because he's an ex-player as well, which I think this could be the start of a case study where ex-players officiate better than referees who are currently on the pitch and anyone in the VAR room, wherever back street, like basement that's in. Because I think that to let tackles go in, I think is something that ex-players will understand. They'll look at it contextually different. Whereas referees will look at the rules and they'll almost be robotic. They'll try and be like, okay, that's a tackle. oh, that's a foul in the box. Surely that's a penalty. Whereas ex-players will look at it and go, momentum's with that player. You know, the lightest touch would bring him down. It's not enough for a penalty. You see what I'm trying to say? So, and given the trying circumstances of what happened in the game as well, I felt he handled that quite well. So I give my hat off to him for that one.
Completely agree. So the first decision that, and it was one that obviously happened last week, the most controversial one. And the reason we're going to touch on it again is because the audio has been leaked. And what I would like to say about listening to it, and I had to listen to it about 3 or 4 times just to understand what on earth they were going on about. Now, call me dumb or whatever you want. It did take me a few attempts, but I'm sorry. I have never seen anything so incompetent in all my life. And how on earth is that VAR room and the miscommunication? How does that even happen to that extent? Reece, break it down for me.
See, what I found quite interesting, and also I find it quite a problem as well, is actually the audio being leaked. No, I'm not saying we shouldn't leak it. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it should be leaked in any shape or form. But I think that is going to cause problems, because that information, if it does get leaked, can lead to more than just investigations. It could lead to threats, especially against referees. And obviously, every referee is a clown anyway. But we shouldn't be. They shouldn't be getting threats from it. Like, we've seen it before. Referees have been forced to retire early because they made one mistake, or they were perceived to have been made a mistake, and they've had death threats. The Champions League game 2004-5 between Chelsea and Barcelona is another example of that, where the referee of 44 years old, Mourinho, made up a random story that Frank Rijkaard was in the referee's dressing room, and they thought that they conspired against Mourinho's Chelsea. So what did they do? They found out he got death threats and he retired. So I think that's another issue. So we've got to be careful with referees, where it may look like, yes, well, I'll criticise the referees every God's sinking week, but I criticise their jobs. The circumstance being that criticise the performances, but if you're going to leak the audio, be very careful, because it only takes a little bit of a quick search on the internet and they can find everything out where they live, and they could just have things sent to you. I think that's a massive problem I have with the audio being leaked. What I do fundamentally agree on, though, are the issues surrounding referees and the game and VAR, where technology is supposed to be a good thing, but either those working with the technology don't know what they're doing, and they're not being explained to properly by technical staff to operate fully, or the technology simply is not as advanced as we actually believe it to be, and it's actually very limited and is actually quite basic, where they're just trying to make things up on the fly. Like, for example, like, you shouldn't be waiting 5 minutes for a goal decision. It should be no longer than a minute tops to review a decision. If you're taking longer than a minute, then the decision should just carry on as normal. I think those things need to be ironed out in the game as well. And the audio especially, there's a few words in there that I don't know if that was purposely done or it's just the way it comes across, but the way they say "good job, lads," that can be taken as well out of context, where they might perceive it as "good job, lads, we're not given the goal." But it could also mean the fact is "good job, lads, you're actually doing your job, even if it's right or wrong." It may come across as a different impression. It could be that you're actually cheating a team. Whether you want to see them get cheated or not, obviously I'd love to see Liverpool get cheated every single bloody week because it's funny as fuck. But it really does dampen the game if referees are actually cheating teams, because it actually hinders the game and it makes people physically want to hurt referees. And people will say, but nobody wants to hurt a referee. If you generally think that as well, like I come back to what I said about Ten Hag earlier on, about not feeling secure in his job, he should actually be aware of it. He should have self-awareness. fans will do anything possible to get a referee if a referee has actually purposely done them wrong. They will not hesitate to find them and lamp them one. So these referees, these governing, especially the governing body like the FA, really need to put into place some course of action for every single team in the Premier League, not just one, because they cry, bitch, and moan want a replay. There needs to be clear-cut, decisive decisions made going forward, and it has to start now.
I completely agree. And another thing I would like to say, and this really puzzled me as well, and it's so frustrating that we are literally at this point advising referees that when they make the call, they have to actually say the decision that they made. Because I think that's another thing that caused all this confusion, where he goes, perfect, to the referee who's just ruled out the goal. Like, VAR did everything, they were correct. But the fact that they brought in the incompetence and basically just didn't give the referee an answer, allowing him to go ahead and make his own stupid decision, costs it again. And with the way it is, it's going to happen again. Look at all the apologies that have had to be made since VAR's come in.
Yeah. I think that's something that's telling is we see in other sports where video assistant refereeing technology, etc., is used, where they are mic'd up and they're saying, well, this is the decision I'm going to make. I agree about so when they're talking to VAR officials, the mic should not be on. You don't want to hear that conversation. You want to hear literally when they come back off and they go, right, XYZ's happened, foul in the box, penalty is expected to be awarded. However, there was a foul in the build-up, which has led to the fact that penalty is not being awarded. We need to have those clear things. Or such and such is through on goal, clear, decisive, like they're not affecting it anyway, but there was actually a foul or an offside that actually does affect the game in that context. If you're just saying perfect, then I agree that's very misleading, and that is a hindrance on the game. And also the referee, in my opinion, should always have the last decision, not VAR. But it really is a question of, are these referees actually spineless?
Fully agree. Julio, do you have anything to add?
It's a communication problem. That's literally all it is. They should learn from this, hopefully, where it's be clear in what you're saying. But then again, that's common sense in everyday life. Whether it's making an order at Costa or it's calling someone and saying happy birthday or whatever. You speak clearly and you make your point known. You don't just throw a few words in a sentence and hope that they understand completely what's going on in your head. You know what I mean? Because he's coming over because the goal's gone in and it's been ruled out in his head. You know, and in his head, he's thinking, okay, so what we've done on the pitch is great. And the only words we're hearing on there is, we're only hearing is, okay, line there, yep. It's on them. It's a communication error. I feel bad for the referee on the pitch because the final decision has been made based on the idiots in a room somewhere who haven't spoken clearly about what's going on. If I'm the referee, I'm asking, right, what am I missing? Is it off? I'm asking questions. So you can only hope that they learn from this. When we saw the incompetency come out in terms of clips last week, I don't think any of us could fathom how bad the communication must have been, even though we all said, what went wrong there? They drew the lines and stuff. At what point, do you know what I mean? Did someone just fall asleep? Like, so I've just ruled out an offside. Is everything good? Hello? And you just see on the other end, and it's just the guys in the room just asleep. Like, so.
I mean, it sounds bad, but the fact that we have to think of insane scenarios like this,
we don't have to. It's the reality.
The reality.
It's absurd. The actual the reality of the situation. We've heard the audio clips. I'm glad they were released because they're protecting referees a lot. The example I keep using from that's almost pushed through the media was Chelsea away 2021. United had a penalty shout. It wasn't given. We didn't hear the clips then, but it was reported by Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire that when they asked the referee why wasn't that a penalty, he said, "I can't give you a penalty." Controversy, because it was like a month late. It was a month after Klopp said Man United get too many penalties and we don't get any, and penalties have been like, as common as UFO signings ever since. So, the fact of the matter is that like, I'm glad the audio was released. I was a little bit staggered to find that the amount of miscommunication there, it was almost like one-word answers. We were getting one-word questions and one-word answers. That's not what it should be. If you're assisting the referee on the pitch, you need to be telling him, your linesman flagged offside. It's not offside. This is what we're seeing. So, because that's what it was supposed to be. The guy upstairs or wherever in the room, wherever, narrating what he's seeing to the guy, got almost monologuing, saying, right, so we've drawn the line here. Luis Diaz's foot is behind the others. Therefore, he is not offside. Therefore, the decision on the pitch that you said it was offside, incorrect, goal should stand. I agree with Reece that the referee's decision on the pitch should be final, but in this scenario, obviously, the referee's decision is wrong. You can't go with that. So, yeah, I'm a bit flabbergasted, to be honest, at how ridiculous that is.
100%. And moving on to the next decision, and I thought this one was, in my opinion, complete lunacy. Mateo Kovacic, how on earth did he stay on the pitch in Manchester City versus Arsenal?
There's people
I've got a theory.
This is my thing, and this is what's bizarre, is the challenges are from behind, where it is with that reckless intent, and people are saying he's not trying to hurt him, or he's not going in. It's always been a red card anyway if you go in with a challenge like that. And they didn't just do it once.
I've been very consistent on, and bearing in mind it was within a 10-minute space as well. I've always been consistent on it. First of all, he didn't get the ball in either of the challenges. He was so late and reckless. And in both of them, I'm pretty sure that in the rule book, if your studs are up, then that means it's a red card.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, is he's coming in from behind as well. It's even worse. Imagine if he was coming in front on. Like, it's minimal protection front or back, but there's more protection in the front, obviously, with your ankle, like your shin guards. But it's lazy refereeing there from the referee. Kovacic, I agree, his time was bad, and it says a lot when City fans are giving Kovacic pelters on Twitter about the whole thing as well. That says a whole lot more for me. Where he's getting absolutely slaughtered by so few fans. The being the actual talisman is the fact is as well that he didn't just do it once, he done it twice, and he got away with it both times. It's very telling.
I don't even understand how VAR didn't even get involved at all.
I don't know,
considering the magnitude of the challenges. Like you just said a minute ago, Julio, were they asleep? Were they watching the new Big Brother on ITV?
I hope not, because
who knows at this point?
It's utter shite TV.
One thing I will say is, I think the fact that they were so close together, maybe my theory is sometimes forget the severity of the challenges for a minute. Sometimes referees, they'll see someone go into a challenge. In some cases, we see them either let it go or give a yellow card, and then minutes later, the same thing happens again from the same player, and they go, no, right, this is your final warning. Anything like that, you're off. That's it. However, in this scenario, granted, there's 6 minutes between the two challenges. However, they are both severe challenges. We saw Curtis Jones get sent off for the same thing last week. We saw Bukayo Saka do the same challenge a few weeks ago against United, and that wasn't even looked upon in the same light. The big problem here is consistency, and the fact that those two were very similar challenges. Paul Pogba was sent off at the Emirates for a very similar challenge 4 or 5 years ago. No, almost 6 years ago now.
Yeah,
there is no consistency. And what you said there, why didn't VAR intervene? The rule for VAR is if it's a
clear and obvious error.
Very clear and obvious error, which it was. Now, if Michael Oliver has gone into his ear, because I think it was Michael Oliver who's officiating.
It was.
Michael Oliver was a referee.
if he's gone into his ear and gone, I'm going to let him off this one. Do you know what I mean? But take the severity out of it. I understand that. However, when you look at both challenges, they're almost identical and they are both same scale. And I think that Kovacic was very lucky to be on the pitch at 29 minutes, let alone at 35, 36 minutes when he put the same challenge in again. So
if you're letting him off though for the first one, understandable. Like I'm using what you just said, their manner of speaking. If you're letting off for the first one, understandable. But for the second one, there should be no there should be no leeway.
No,
You've done it.
No.
You've done it once. I've let you off. We'll see if you actually change.
If it was if it was a different type of challenge,
then
where it wasn't as severe, then maybe it would be questionable. But
the fact is, it's a carbon copy challenge on the same player. It's the same player that gets tackled twice as well. That's even more telling. It seemed more of a purpose of make sure you take this man out at all costs. Kovacic, your role is not to dispossess Declan Rice. Your job is to break Declan Rice. And that's exactly what it looked like. It seems like it stemmed from that as well as obviously Chelsea-West Ham rivalry as well. Now it's Man City, Arsenal, but both players still representing London clubs. It's that same telling point of, we know Kovacic is a brilliant footballer, but he's also very hot-headed. We know Declan Rice is a good footballer. He's also very hot-headed. There's no protection for Declan Rice in either challenge. In either way, he has no protection. If he goes down, severe challenge, he could break something or he could fracture something. The case being like...
Do you reckon City are going to get more charges now? Because I don't know why, but it just looked very rigged in Kovacic's favour. It's almost like we know we're not going to get sent off. They ain't got the bollocks to send us off. Let's go free for all. Let's slide however we want.
I don't know. I mean, I to be fair, laughing at City charges is always a good one.
But in seriousness,
seriousness, no, absolutely not. This case, Kovacic should have been sent off. Anyone that disagrees with it, I'd like to know the reason why they think it's not sending off. But I can agree with not sending him off after the first challenge. You let him off in that sense of you're giving him a leeway. Okay, that's your words. But the second time, I'm like, nah, you've literally just done this 5 minutes ago. You need to go. So but Michael Oliver there has to look. Michael Oliver said how much
time there was. Maybe it could have been that time. I mean, when you're actually in the game, sometimes you lose track of time as a referee, which I know sounds bad, but sometimes it happens. And I think that.
But even if it's 5-10 minutes apart, even 20 minutes apart, there should be no like. We've literally we've had this.
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate from a referee's point of view because sometimes they like to let things go. However, in this scenario, the referee was wrong to let it go.
Yeah, this should have been a straight red.
It's VAR. Why didn't VAR intervene? It was a clear and obvious error.
I think the only reason VAR didn't interfere is because I'm pretty sure for both tackles, because it was very quick in the games, but for both tackles, they weren't really giving us fouls either.
I know. I think the second one caused a lot of. The second one definitely caused a lot of uproar. I just can't remember the first one.
The first one wasn't carried on, but the second one was chaotic, and that's where I was like, "You've got to send them off now." But the first one, I was just like, "Okay, it's a challenge. Let's see what happens." Okay, no red, no booking. Okay, move on. Should have been a straight red for the second one. That's when City fans came on Twitter going at him, let alone Arsenal fans, City fans. And I'm going, it's about time they agree on something.
Exactly. And ultimately, that just says it all with it. And moving on to the final one, the most obscene one, we can say. And it comes from the Women's Super League. Alex Greenwood, I'm sorry, but what was this referee thinking with this decision?
I'd like
main character syndrome.
I would like to, first of all, before we even discuss this topic, because I wasn't watching the game, I was doing a few other things at the same time. I'd like to thank Maisie for this one because it was Maisie that brought this to my attention. And she then sent me the clip of it as well. And to be fair, I've seen clips of why Diomande got sent off for Sporting yesterday. That's another
She was tweeting about that, wasn't she?
Yep, I saw those ones. That definitely wasn't a sending off either. That's an issue. Yep, that was an issue in Portugal. That referee needs to be held accountable. But the Mason, sorry, Neil said Mason. Sorry, my apologies. The Alex, she's a snake as well. The Alex Greenwood sending off made no sense. Now, barring circumstance, her first yellow card was definitive. That was a bookable offence. The second one, she's been sent off for a second yellow for time wasting on a free kick from her own half. When you actually look at it, she had no one to pass to. She got no one to play the ball to until the very last second when a defender came and made themselves into space so she could pass the ball. That's not a sending off. I can understand booking a goalkeeper for taking longer than 6 seconds to play the ball upfield or play the ball out in the field. Or you're in your corner with so much time you're just not playing the ball. Then that's a yellow. But in this circumstance, you're taking a free kick from your own half where you're actually looking for a way to hit the ball upfield, that's not a bookable offence by any shape or form. I agree with Julio. That is main character syndrome, where the referee's coming in going, all right, she's clearly not taking advancement of the play. She's clearly not looking to progress the game. When you actually look at it, Alex Greenwood is actually looking left, right, and centre trying to find a pass. She's actually looking up before she even makes her run. Then she turns the pass and she hits it back to a defender. That really is telling of the referee, where the referees just came in and decided, nah, mate, off you go. Now, obviously, City lost. City drew that game, which is good for United because we were shit against Arsenal, but still got a 2-2 draw. That result still benefits United. But even as a football fan, it still drags the women's game down as well. But when people already mock the women's game for some of the players like Megan Rapinoe, who comes up with stupid comments saying that women should be paid equally as men. Now, I'm not saying that's stupid. Don't take me wrong. I'm not saying it's stupid that women should demand to be paid the same more as men. But your game is not as advanced as a men's game, unfortunately, yet. However, you should still be treated equally when it comes to decision-making on and off the field, where you should be given a chance to further develop your game on that grand scale. And I'm an advocate for that. And I want that to do well. I want women's football to succeed in the sense that we can enjoy it equally as much as the men, because it's actually really fun to watch, especially for progressive play. It's really good. But that referee has literally just set that game back.
Do you know what the worst part is? One of the bad part about the decision is when you watch the clip, just as Greenwood's actually like, her legs moved, she's next to the ball, she's literally like half a second away from kicking it, the referee suddenly has just come running into the shot of the video, and you can see she's running over, and everyone's like confused, like, what's going on here? I do think it's terrible refereeing, and I think that it's not time wasting. We've seen
that's
moments
looking
like,
for it's looking for a pass.
We've seen
the
that
worst thing was that
they'll step forward,
the set
step back.
piece, God,
No, I was
the
going to say
set piece was in motion as well. Like, that's
Exactly.
not time wasting. That is just interfering with play.
Bingo.
And not following the actual law book of football, which, saying this on an actual podcast in a top division match is complete insanity.
There's only one word for that kind of refereeing: idiocy.
I was going to call Julio, but sure, I'm only messing. But I think that's generally my biggest concern. Is it's not just happening in the men's game; it's happening in the women's game. And to be fair, if Maisie is watching, I know for a fact Maisie can give me far many more suggestions. I mean, I watch the women's game, but I don't watch it as religiously as she does. But I've watched the whole game. Like, I've seen it in the Champions League last year with Arsenal and Barcelona. Sorry, Arsenal and was it Arsenal Barcelona? No, it was Barcelona Wolfsburg final. It was Arsenal versus Wolfsburg. The decision for the penalty in the second leg was quite sketchy as well. So when you look at things like that, where it's happening also in the European matches, what is going on with the laws of the game? And that is another thing that really has me concerned, gentlemen.
One last thing for Refwatch. I don't know if you gentlemen saw it. I mentioned it behind the scenes, obviously backstage. The Dan Neil sending off for Sunderland at the weekend. Let me run the scenario by you if you haven't watched the clip.
Go on.
What's happened is he didn't do much wrong by all accounts. Standing 20 yards away from the referee, he threw up his arms in frustration, questioned why Sunderland had not been awarded a free kick where they'd lost the ball, and he used what journalists like to call an expletive to emphasize his point. That's all he did. 20 yards away. I think it was the same thing we discussed with Van Dijk a few weeks ago against Newcastle. But this was 20 yards away because a player was fouled, didn't get a free kick.
And he's opened his mouth.
And all he's shown how unhappy he is about it, and he's just been sent off. I believe it was a second yellow card. It was on the cusp of half time. But
this is what we spoke about on last week's show on the previous home when I said player reputation will come back to haunt them. It's the same like club captains who go to a referee. A club captain should be allowed to go. Bruno Fernandes is the Manchester United captain. Yes, he is a bit of a bitch at times, but he does have the right to go to a referee to ask about a decision or at least plead the case. If players cannot approach a referee anymore, including captains, where they're just having a rational conversation, then you may as well just turn football into basketball and just have like nobody touch each other. Like you can tackles are banned, shoulder barges are banned, everything like that is out the door now. It's either you touch the ball or you don't.
It's basically wrapping referees up in more cotton wool. And I think obviously we've mentioned it a billion times before, but the fact that they continue, in my opinion as well, over tightening the rules of dissent, we're just going to keep seeing, even when, for example, you might not even be like watching Sunderland Middlesbrough, you might not have even been speaking to the referee direct. He could be speaking to a teammate. And I think this is what happened in this scenario as well. And at the end of the day, you're going to have more of these ridiculous decisions coming around just because the referee.
There's one thing I like about this sending off. There's only one thing I like about it, and it plays with my consistency that I've said on the show, which is the referees in rugby get a lot more respect. We see a lot more of their interactions with players, and I've said that I would love it if the footballers showed more respect to referees like this. So the problem is the easy solution to that would be if anyone uses an expletive, if anyone acts in that manner, send them off. But because we've been so accustomed to it, change doesn't seem, it just seems wrong and it seems ridiculous. So I'm a bit torn because I think shouting the F word 20 yards away, I think it was, for me, it's a bit.
It's a natural
it's a natural
reaction of life. It's a natural reaction. Like if I'm playing football, my teammate gets tackled, I'm literally going to shout back like "fuck," or "fuck," or "fuck you," or "fuck this." I'm going to do that.
It questions the referee's character and whether they're thick or thin-skinned. Because I think to be a referee, you have to be quite thick-skinned. Because you're going to, whether you get things wrong, get things right, you're going to get some kind of abuse from people. You know, I mean, like I could have experienced it at an under-13s game. Okay,
yeah,
it's everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's parents or coaches, even if I got the right decision, someone's not going to be happy. The fact of the matter is, you're right. I like the idea of changing the dissent so it shows there's more authority on the pitch. However, I have also always questioned the characters on the pitch as that are referees, and wrapping these imbeciles up in cotton wool is not the answer. The problem is, at the moment, we just can't find the right balance, and it's just there almost seems to be this ongoing war between the Referees Association and literally everyone else in the footballing world.
Yeah, I completely agree. But here's another thing as well, and this is like tongue in cheek. We're playing football, and I've literally just tackled Nathan, and you're the referee. And Nathan's teammate is shouting like "fuck you" at me, for example, or which is completely fine. Like, the referee shouldn't be sending a player off if that's their reaction. I mean, of course, you're going to defend your teammate in that circumstance, or if it's vice versa.
But that's the difference in context, because
If
I
they
think in this scenario, if Dan Neil was shouting the F word at the referee directly, like you're an effing joke or something, from 5 yards away, then I'd understand. But if you, in your scenario,
But
it's
I've
a
seen
natural
times where
reaction, and I haven't got that. For me, I wouldn't have an issue with that. If
I've
I was
seen-
the official on the pitch,
I've seen
I wouldn't have an
players-
issue with that.
I've seen players within 5 yards to a referee where a tackle's happened and they're like, fuck this, and they walk off. The referee does nothing. But that's the same way. That's the exact same circumstance. That's within 5 yards. Oh, fuck this. And they just walk off in anger. And the referee's like, I get it. And they do nothing. It seems
But
like
it's
this
the
referee.
character.
But
It's
this,
the character then.
I feel like the referee is self-sabotaging. Like it's self-sabotage from a referee. And if you can't take it, then you won't get to work in the. I guarantee that referee is sabotage. Like, well, it'll come back to haunt them when they're sabotaged when they go up against a certain game that they may want to actually be involved in. They'll be like, maybe not, because you can't handle it. Like, that same referee couldn't handle an Old Firm game or a game between Boca and River Plate, because they'll get an even bigger hostile environment every single bloody time. And if you can't hack it, you're in the wrong profession. Like, imagine it's like the 90th minute of an Old Firm game, and it could be a penalty to either Rangers or Celtic. A tackle's happened, and the player comes up to you, and they're like, what the actual fuck?
Mm-hmm.
And you see it, but they're not being aggressive towards you. It's in the English language. Like, those words are part of language. You cannot dismiss them. So like, it could be a circumstance where, say, James Tavernier has been fouled in the box, and Connor Goldson or whatever. Well, it wouldn't be because he's back up field. Sorry. Chiriel Dessers has been fouled in the box. Tavernier as captain just walks up and he's like, "What the fuck is this?" Or vice versa. It could be Kyogo fouled in the box and Callum McGregor comes up and he goes, "What the fuck is this?" The referee, if they were to send them off for that, they would be pelted. And we've seen it before in Old Firm games where referees been pelted by
in
coins.
that scenario, it would be soft. It would show that they don't have character. And that's what we're missing nowadays. The best referees we've seen in the past that we mentioned today, for example, that legendary Italian,
Collini, yeah.
Collini, yeah. I was waiting for you to say it, Reece. You saw the character he had. He took no nonsense from no one. He called it as he saw it, and that was that. I'm not saying all referees need to be like him. We don't think they can, but they don't have the character to match. You know, in some cases, like say Liverpool got a really, 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 really dodgy penalty decision at the weekend, they were always going to get it regardless, even if it was non-existent. They were going to get it almost because of what happened last weekend, because the referees aren't thick-skinned enough.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That's the problem we've got. We've got confusion in what the rules of dissent are, and as a result, there's confusion in the referees, and they're not competent enough, nor are they strong enough to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem that we're going to have for years to come, and less major reforms are made to it ultimately, like we've said many a time. But moving swiftly on to our next topic, and one that over the weekend, and if you told me this at the start of the season that they were going to do this, I would have thought, no, there's surely a club not incompetent enough to do it. Birmingham City. One
they
of
have
the
form
best,
for this.
They do. They're sixth in the league. They spent the last 7 years at the bottom half of the championship table fighting relegation under shocking owners, leaving the stadium to just rot to pieces. They have one of the best transfer windows for a long while. One of the best in the championship. John Eustace has really united the club under their new regime as well. Got them playing some nice football and has pushed them up the table. All of a sudden, they sack him because they want a bigger name. And who do they decide? Oh, let's just get a failing Wayne Rooney from DC United.
Yeah.
Back down the table, Birmingham go for me. And in fact, on another level, this reminds me a lot of when they sacked Gary Rowett a few years ago, brought in Gianfranco Zola, absolutely stunk them out and nearly got relegated. Guys, what's your thoughts on this?
First of all, to see Rooney at least back in English football in any shape, like if you're English, is a good thing. However, when you're actually looking at it from a statistical point of view, he has the worst record in MLS history as a manager. Like that's not a joke. That's a fact. Wayne Rooney has the worst managerial record with DC United. I don't know what has inspired Birmingham to make that choice.
American owners, bigger name. We
Possibly.
saw it in the last ownership with Birmingham. They sacked Gary Rowett, who had a good reputation in English football with teams who were on a shoestring or something.
A steady hand in the championship, you could say.
Yeah.
It's almost like they don't like steady owners. Owners will come in with an idea of branding of some kind. You see what Birmingham City have said, their owners have said about how they want. You've seen the statement about what kind of manager they're looking for.
Yeah,
it's a branding thing, and what better for a branding way of football than to appoint a branding fashionable name? We saw it with Bournemouth a little bit in the summer. They got rid of Gary O'Neill, who seemed like a steady hand. I wasn't surprised by it, bringing in Iraola as well, regardless of whether he'll come good or not remains to be seen. But I just think that it's not surprising. We've all said this was coming for weeks, even though Birmingham have been good. I actually thought that I didn't think the players that they brought in the summer would gel as well. I didn't think they'd be as high up as they are. But
I think there's another reason why he's been sacked as well that might curtail an interest as well, because we mentioned it on last week's show.
Yeah, I am curious to go over that again.
but in terms of like Rooney, obviously I wish him well at Birmingham, but no one will forget the fact that even you can mug off the MLS all you want, and that's fine, but it doesn't matter. It's still professional football. If your record is that bad in that league, no one is going to forget. So he's got to show why he's been given the job. I hope he does really well. We will see. We'll see where it goes, but I think there's one thing as well that I find it very picky is his choice of backroom staff, John O'Shea and Ashley Cole. I'm not sure if they're credentialed. I don't know what their coaching credentials are like, but I feel like he really should have went for more experienced coaches on his side. It could backfire, but the good thing is though is at least he's got two fullbacks that actually knew how to defend. They might be able to get some sort of defensive structure for them, maybe potentially. I don't know, but I think it's quite telling his coaching staff. I'm not sure what you guys think about that, but what I was going to refer to about John Eustace is he was listed as another name potentially for the Rangers job as well. I think that's also forced Birmingham's hand where actually we sack him, he goes. It avoids Rangers having to approach us. But Rangers then distance away from John Eustace as well. They've distanced away from Frank Lampard. God.
Good decision by Rangers, that.
Yeah. I've got nothing against Lampard, but as a manager, he's not particularly great. Great player, not a good manager. I think it's another thing that's actually forced Birmingham's hand as well, is actually maybe he's not as committed as we like. And we saw as well with top jobs, like just before the Bayern Leipzig game, Max Zebra, the sporting director, got dismissed from the Leipzig director of football job because he was linked to the director of football job at Bayern. He was linked to the job, but he never committed to Leipzig, so they sacked him on the eve of that game. And I think that's forced. Could potentially leave it if you want. No problem with that. The Queen herself. Hello, Maisie. Yeah, that's a good point. Friends with Brady. I certainly think we've got the power with that, but he definitely does have the worst record in MLS history. And it's not even close. Like, there's a landslide, and then there's Wayne Rooney. I don't hate the guy.
Bob Bradley looked like a good manager.
He is actually a decent manager, but he's a decent manager, but he wouldn't work in the Prem. And we've seen it.
Throwback and a half that.
He doesn't, but Rooney was a great player, but as a manager, like if you can't cut it in MLS, then there's seriously something wrong. I don't know what it is, but
May I present the case for?
We'll see.
Okay.
I don't think there is a case for him. I think his coaching staff will hinder him as well.
Potentially. I mean, the way I look at it is, I don't know much the ins and outs of the details, but apparently he had a rough job at DC because of the higher ups. I don't know what it is regarding whether it was an ownership problem or
with
just a board.
DC, and I know that I'm going to be a bit biased there. I think that would be the case. There is a hierarchy issue if they are running DC like the way they are running Swansea.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think, considering the way that they've sort of dropped off like a stone since they took over about 5-6 years ago, then pretty much pooling all their resources to the big name stuff at DC and then just completely flopping like a stone.
Yeah, I think in terms of case 4, I think Rooney gets this job on his derby credentials. And I'll say what you want about the fact they were relegated in a relegation battle for a year and a half, that he was there as a manager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a 21-point deduction where he was, without that deduction, they would have finished 15th or 16th with a squad that was threadbare and losing players left, right, and centre all season. Like, Phil Jagielka had a short-term contract till January, and because of the rules, they couldn't renew that contract. Jagielka, say what you want as a past it centre-back, but like, he must have been a good influence. You bring someone with his Premier League quality, he will have had leadership, and I think that, they would have been mid-table with a team built on either
point.
youth.
That's a very good point.
On youth or players who were on the brink of retirement. I only disagree with this because international football, you know what I mean? But and the women's game's different. But it's a very good point. And I just think that with Rooney, I think you would. The derby job was different during the circumstances were a lot different there. That was a pure free fall circus. I'm surprised we haven't seen a documentary about that. Like, everyone has probably seen the first season of Sunderland Till I Die, and how bad Sunderland were that year.
I still haven't watched.
Seriously.
No, I haven't had the time to watch it.
It's genuinely a meme.
Then there's no point in me watching it.
If you watch it objectively, it can be a little bit interesting, but that's if you can take away the meme side of it.
What I found more interesting was I found the Tottenham one more interesting. All or nothing.
The all or nothing, that's a good
one,
yeah.
But in retrospect, it still doesn't do enough for me. I need to see more. Obviously, good point referencing Rooney at Derby. The interest being here is what he will look to bring to Birmingham. They've got a good squad there, but it would be
a different structure completely. Ownership model. There's circus around it. The squad seems to be better, more settled. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
We'll see how he does with a better quality of player where he can actually invest in this. He'll be able to invest in his squad. But if they randomly go from 6th in the league to 18th, which is still 6 places above bottom position, if they were to slip from that to that, then I would be like, oh shit. But
we've seen Birmingham do it before, so that's why it comes as less of a surprise. But
yeah, they do rely on a lot of youth. That's true. I'm not going to write him off. I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to say though is he has one set of fans who will never let him forget the MLS, and there's some that will say they're still Derby. You're going to have both of them butt heads. They're going to clash. We're going to see which one prevails in that way. What I'm eager to find out, though, is how he does. I'm eager to see how he does. And that's interesting. Maisie saying that her friend is angry.
Especially with what Birmingham have been through over the last couple of years. It does surprise me a little bit.
It depends on the context. Why is the friend angry? Are they angry at the name that's been chosen and maybe the reasons behind it? Or is it because someone has come in did a good job last season, albeit they finished 18th, I think, or something around there. It's a good start to the season. They're in a good position, probably their best position for years. And suddenly he's out the door. But it doesn't look like it's for footballing reasons. It's either personal reasons or branding reasons. Those are the two that people are looking at. You know, if Rooney comes in and somehow takes them to the title within the next year, then maybe fair enough. We'll look back on it and think, okay, fair enough. You know, Eustace laid the foundation, but it was good. But it depends on the context. I think if it's a personal reason, I think it's based on what you've said, Reece, your theory regarding the timing of the Rangers job and everything.
I still think that's an impact.
Exactly. It could be branding reason, you know, big name, you know, it's almost like a classic American ownership thing to do. Could be a mix of both, could be neither. So I think that,
I mean, we'll see how he plays, but I'd like to know what Maisie thinks about the choice of backroom staff. But I'm not overly impressed by his choices. I think John O'Shea and Ashley Cole will have him out the door quick. She's also made a fair point about ex-players not being good as managers. Yes.
To a certain extent.
But she's got a point, though, because...
she does. Absolutely.
It's few and far between. It's so few and far between. So the likes of Zidane. But then on the other side, you've got another fantastic player in Pirlo, who is a mixture, but he was thrown to the deep end. He did actually okay with Juventus. But then he was buggered.
He went... or nothing?
Yeah, I have. He went to
Turkey. Very interesting.
Yeah, he went to Turkey, though, and he's been all over the place. Look at another one who's quite fitting is Gennaro Gattuso. He's been everywhere. But I still like him. Like, I really enjoy Gattuso, but he's been all over the place. Now he's in Marseille, scum club.
Gattuso's a different breed, though, because Gattuso has had job offers where it's all been a circus. So he's going into these clubs that have really fallen off and it's really not well, and he almost seems to be stabilizing all of them. So fair play to him, but it seems like he's almost been given a profile, almost kind of like a Fireman Sam kind of thing, but at the top level.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. And I think that Maisie does have a point with the fact that...
No, I will always call Marseille a scum club. I know you had an amazing time with them on Context. And bring that comment back up. Context. I know you were brilliant with them on FIFA. Oh. Rightfully so. No, genuinely. But I have personal distaste for Marseille, and it stems from the Champions League scum that they are, for how they won the Champions League. I have complete distaste for them for how they paid their way through to win it, paying referees against every club, including Rangers. The only one they didn't pay enough, funnily enough, was the final, which they didn't deserve to win anyway. But genuine circumstance is they are scum. To me. They didn't win the UCL fair and square. No, they didn't. Stop it.
Anyway, moving swiftly on. The next thing, it's being announced tomorrow, but, and I said it briefly before when there were murmurings of it, I'm not happy about this announcement. I mean, yes, it'll bring a lot, considering that there is Welsh involvement with it, in particular from my angle as well, but the way that it's been organised, and also the way that the grounds have been selected and where it's going to be held, it just screams England. It screams A, England bias, B, England as hosts with a few extras pulled from out of a hat, and C, even the stadium choices, I do think in some aspects won't work. So if I just read them out very quickly, and you'll see the imbalance of it, considering it's meant to be a UK and Ireland Euros. Wembley, which you know will just hold a ridiculous amount of games. Then you've got Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, Etihad, Everton's new ground, St James's Park, Villa Park. Those are the England ones. Then you get to the UK and Ireland section. So you've got Millennium Stadium, Hampden Park, Casement Park, which is yet to be rebuilt, and Aviva Stadium. That is absolutely appalling. everyone knows my opinions that it should straight up be just Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, kick England out of it. Or if you're going to have, say, for example, an England Euros, you just have it in England. This doesn't work because at the end of the day, because you're having all these separate hosts dotted here and there, you have to have all the home nations automatically qualify. It is completely ridiculous. And even some of the grounds, as I've said before, that have been selected, stupid. What's your thoughts on it, Reece?
Again, it's annoyed me the amount of English clubs that have been listed when there's better stadiums up here than some of the ones that have been listed. Like you cannot tell me, as a football fan, that the Etihad, Tottenham Stadium, Everton's new ground, which doesn't even exist yet, are better than Celtic Park, Ibrox, Hampden Park for atmosphere. Sorry. You can't tell me they're better than the Aviva Stadium in London, in Ireland, which is one of the best atmospheres, but they've also got other ones as well. I think it's quite fitting that it does scream bias again towards one particular nation. And also, choosing a stadium that's even a football stadium as well from Wales is bonkers as well. Like
absolutely shocking in my opinion.
I don't understand their decisions. I think it's quite stupid. I do agree Tottenham is the best looking ground in England, it is. But in terms of atmosphere, I don't think it eclipses the Scottish ones I've listed. Me personally, I don't think it does. But the Amex is listed. Rightfully so, I understand.
No,
I think it was originally supposed to be listed. Sorry, the Etihad is there for the modern reason as well, same as Tottenham. But like, one thing I will say, and I stand by this, is. Yeah, I mean, I suppose capacity is fair, but the three stadiums I've listed
I wouldn't
are
even
also...
say they haven't gone off capacity either.
But if you go off capacity, only the Tottenham Stadium and only Tottenham's ground and Wembley are bigger than Ibrox, Celtic Park, and Hampden.
And Old
collectively,
Trafford, of course, which obviously
but
Old Trafford isn't included.
Old Trafford isn't included. Old Trafford isn't included because Old Trafford is at the moment not a wise move unless change happens and they can actually properly invest in it. But I know you are, mate. I'm happy for you as well. Congrats for that. I'll go to a few games, but like, I don't know. I feel like there should be more of like. I understand obviously England out of the UK is the bigger nation, so I understand England's going to have the bigger stadiums, and I'm not gonna like dismiss that, but there is 3 perfectly good stadiums for European and international quality matches in Scotland. They're being used by international teams that should be used. You cannot tell me an atmosphere of 53,000 at Ibrox or 60,000 at Celtic Park or 65,000, 75,000, whatever at Hampden Park. You're not telling me they're terrible. But it is. And Maisie Cardiff is listed. It's the Millennium Stadium, which I was at last year, which isn't even a football stadium. It's a rugby stadium.
And not only that as well, obviously you were in the fancier part on the top tier. You go to what we call the floor. My word, that is looking so dated. It's not ready for the Euros.
Yeah, it's not even going to take time. It's not even going to take time. It's going to take serious commitment.
It needs a huge refurbishment. Like I've said it many a time before, it should just be Cardiff City Stadium and that's not me being biased or anything. It's pretty much a brand new stadium. You can renovate it and make it ready.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a more suitable option. Or even as a matter of it, renovate the Millennium Stadium and use both.
Even like
instead of chuck it to.
Even stadiums that are like longevity in the league that that fill out regularly. Stamford Bridge isn't even being listed as an English stadium, and they're looking to increase that. Todd Bowley's came out and said when they bought the club, one thing they will do is improve infrastructure.
It'll be ready by that time. And
why
even
is
another
why
one
is Stamford,
that I was shocked about. Where's the Stadium of Light?
I don't know. That South Midge, I've been in that stadium. Head under it, and my head was right underneath the roof. I was like, it's really like. But that's the thing, though, Maisie. You're saying if you saw the state of Stamford Bridge, but they've actively come and
They've got
said we're going to
plans.
invest. Yeah, and that's the thing that's interesting. What I think is St James's Park is listed. Yep.
Yeah, so is Hampden as well.
Yeah,
But I
I'm
have
still
a feeling for them to be
I'm
able to
still-
use Hampden Park, they're going to have to massively refurb it.
Oh, they will. It's fine. Like they will, and that's something that won't be ignored. Because look at how well our national team's doing at the minute. Like there's so much intrigue and interest in our national team at the moment from Scotland as in general. Fans go to games selling out every single time.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, like that will get invested as well. See if they generally change it in a football stadium for like the whole tournament. You've got Murrayfield right there and then as well. Absolutely,
Could be a good option for Edinburgh, to be fair.
There's like Edinburgh's got so many stadiums as well. Like for smaller games, if it's like smaller nations to qualify, this is not disrespect to them, but like you could use Tynecastle, you could use Easter Road. Like even like the new Aberdeen Stadium is renovated. It actually looks okay. But I can't for the life of me understand why that Celtic Park and Ibrox aren't listed, but it's just Hampden. I can't for the life of me because that just seems that's just complete exclusion. Like you can get so much out of that where it's just fun. I think it's genuinely just stupid from UEFA again, where they're going, it's okay when they know.
Absolutely, Julio. What's your thoughts on this?
I got nothing to add on that. You guys have reiterated, I think, what was wrong with it. I think I'm a bit upset, obviously, that Old Trafford's not on it, but it's understandable when it's not been touched in about 18 years. You know, Old Trafford with its tradition, its history, and just how iconic it is. It's literally called the Theatre of Dreams. Like for all we know, we could see a country that never gets out of the group stages. They could have had a final game of their group in that stadium, score the goal that takes them out of the group into the knockouts of the Euros for the first time. Theatre of Dreams. That's what everyone would dream of. But yeah, I think that it's a very unfair divide, and I feel like there are some in the English list that should be replaced by at least one of the old firm stadiums.
I agree. And even with what Liam said as well, I reckon if you have a chance of doing it, mix Croke Park in there as well. Maybe get a Limerick stadium or build one in Cork or something like that. I mean, there's comment of the night.
I was going to make it, but Maisie stole my thunder. Thank you. I was going to say that.
Phenomenal. We will leave that there for the live stream trophy of tonight. Phenomenal.
I was going to make that comment as well, but she stole my thunder. I'm okay with that.
For anyone just listening, she said that she should have brought shampoo to Old Trafford because you could have a shower in there. So
yeah, and you won't need a towel because you're just straight up after that anyway. It's just washing the hair. You're good. I agree about the Aviva Stadium because obviously Scotland went over to play Ireland in the Nations League. Obviously they got relegated. We didn't, but and I love Ireland. That's just tongue in cheek. The stadium was absolutely bouncing when we went over for them, and it's the same like when they came over like for us. Like it was just back and forth, like amazing atmospheres, amazing crowds. Synergy is important. Yeah, like Gaelic football and all that stuff. Like same for us. Like fuck Gaelic football. Nobody watches it. Croke Park, 80,000 people. Imagine the turnout. That would be insane. Imagine if it was like Republic of Ireland versus I don't know, Portugal. Or Republic of Ireland, funnily enough, versus like I would have said England, but they're a host. Republic of Ireland versus the Netherlands again. Not the Aviva, but you have it at Croke Park. You're getting manic.
Yeah.
Crowds coming. And I'd be all fucking in. I'd be all in.
I completely agree. And there's one other thing that I will add as well. Just a quick one. FIFA have told UEFA to hold their beer. This is complete insanity. I mean, adding Morocco into Spain and Portugal is insane in itself. I know we're going up to bigger numbers in the World Cup, but it's just ridiculous amount of traveling, and to add the South American teams into it for nostalgia, mental.
It makes sense to have the South American ones because if you look at it, the first World Cup winner is Uruguay, so I like that. Argentina are in there as well. Paraguay, though, I don't know, but
I would say if they're going to do it for nostalgia reasons, hold the entire tournament in South America.
Yeah, it would have been absolutely amazing. Like just collective, or just me. I don't know if you could just give it to Uruguay. I don't know what their stadium capacities are like for the rest of their clubs, but Uruguay would be fun. I think if you're going to give it to one South American nation, theoretically there is only one choice, and that's Brazil. Which sounds horrible because they're the most successful team to win it, but when you look at their stadium capacities, it's more than just the Maracanã. They have massive stadiums. I don't know what Uruguay's like. I only know about Montevideo, which is huge.
Exactly. Interesting. And moving on to our final topic of the
Wait. Liam's question is very telling. Who automatically qualifies is the question. It'll be Morocco, Spain, Argentina, which is a shambles. They should be made to qualify.
Yeah.
Uruguay, because I'd love to see Bielsa go through qualifying. That'd be fucking sick. So Spain, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina. Is it Portugal? Is the other one?
Portugal, yeah. And
so there's your 6 nations. Wild. But at least there's one thing. At least Africa's a full-on qualified representation already. That's great. That's great for the major continents like South America, Europe, and Africa. You see those. There is one other country, I'd have loved to have seen this go back to for hosting. I would have loved it if this had been a World Cup hosted. If this World Cup, funnily enough, was hosted by Japan. Because Japan haven't hosted the World Cup since 2002 with South Korea. And that was controversial itself because of referees screwing the Italians. But they were genuinely good tournament. I would love to see it, but the only problem is time. The games would be horrific. Ivory Coast not a bad idea. I've always liked Ivory Coast. They've got some amazing players. I think one thing it's telling though is Diomande scored in the final. Yeah, or if he's somehow still playing Wilfred Zaha for pure banter. I think one thing that is important is you get it right. I think one other nation that needs to host a World Cup again, because the first one, even though people claim it was good, it was genuinely quite poor for controversy, is South Africa in 2010.
That was a fantastic World Cup.
It was great from the absolute chaos that we got, where the Dutch became violent sociopaths, or Brazil were soundly beaten playing beautiful football, by controversy where Melo scored the first ever own goal by a Brazilian, which I'll never forget. And don't worry, I'm not bringing it up because Germany absolutely spanked England, even though that was controversial enough with the goal that was never given, which shows technology is a disaster. My issues with that World Cup, one, the Vuvuzela completely drowned out the fans. It was
just
awful.
Sounded like a beehive, didn't it? Awful.
Yeah, that ruined the atmosphere. And two, the ball itself wasn't even a bloody football. I would have loved it if we just had a normal atmosphere and it was a normal football that was not scientifically designed for only Germans, Diego Forlan and Giovanni Brand Bronckhorst to master. Because when you looked at it, the best players who kicked that ball at the World Cup were every single German that touched the ball, coincidentally, because it was Adidas, but mind you, Germans have got brains. Forlan was a master of a free kick with that bloody Jubilani ball, and Van Bronckhorst scored the goal of the tournament with that 40-yard screamer. But I would like to see it go back to South Africa for that reason, because I really love that Johannesburg, Cape Town was fantastic. I did not like the zoo. I know people love the Zuzela, but I just hated it. It's like, and I'm saying this in the nicest way, hearing the vuvuzela is like listening to the bagpipes. Incessant droning. I don't like it. Like, forget patriarchy. It's just insulting to my eardrums. So I don't want to hear either or. And I know that drawn the Maze tournament because I've heard it on TV once. It's horrible, but just an atmosphere is beautiful. And South African, like African fans in general, but South Africa, Jesus Christ, it was so good. But even like we got the atmosphere that South Africa should have had 4 years later in Brazil, because there was no vuvuzelas. It was just pure passion football fans, and Argentina losing the final.
Exactly.
Oh, amazing. Why are you asking that?
Anyway, swiftly moving on. We're going to very quickly touch up on some key games for our nations in the international break that is coming up this week. And who am I going to start with?
Nagelsmann's debut's coming.
It is.
Come at that last. Come at Nagelsmann's debut last, because I've got a lot to say on that one.
We absolutely will. So I'm going to nip to you, Julio. So Albania versus Czech Republic. What's your thoughts on that one?
Must win. It's a 6-pointer for top spot. You know, Silvinho's done very well with Pablo Zabaleta as his number 2. It's in sight, but it's on home soil. We drew with them when we went there. So I think it's important because Czech Republic are 2 points behind with a game in hand on us. So if we beat them, it puts us right into pole position. Nothing will be done yet. We still have to play Moldova, who I believe are, I want to say, level on points with Czech Republic. I think they're both on 8 points, and Poland are only on 6 points.
That's a good point, Mason.
Yeah, Poland are in 4th on 6th at the moment, 6 points.
Yeah, exactly. So it's imperative that Albania at least come away with something. We can't afford to lose that game. I think they've got a better chance against getting wins in the other remaining games, but I think that Czech Republic is such a big game and we just can't. We need to come away with something.
Absolutely. And there's a massive game away for Scotland as well on Thursday night. Spain away. What's your thoughts on it, Reece?
We played them off the park at Hampden at the very beginning of the tournament, and my initial thing for that is I thought we would. I did say that I wasn't sure how it would go, but I probably said best case scenario is we get a draw and we'll probably win the rest. We've won every single game, which as a Scotland fan shocks the life out of me because that doesn't happen. We've been fantastic, top of our group. We've maintained control. However, since that result where we absolutely ridiculed Spain, Spain have scored goals for fun. They've dominated play. They've won games they're expected to win. And they're still behind us by a significant points margin, but they are at least forcing their way to close the gap. Do I expect Scotland to beat Spain? No. Do we have a chance? Yes, we freaking do. But it will be quite telling how we set up, particularly in the midfield against them when they have been controlling possession for fun for years. Like, it was what really set them apart. When we played them, is we really disrupted their play in the midfield when we beat them at Hampden Park. If we can disrupt their play over in Spain, we do have a chance, but our record against Spain is mixed match, to be fair. It's always high scoring, funnily enough, between Scotland and Spain. It's always high scoring, no matter who wins. I think we have a chance. Best case scenario is I'm going to say a draw, but you would definitely tip Spain to be favourites for this one. But what's good for us anyway is Norway are playing Georgia. And win, lose or draw for us, whatever happens in that game, Euro 2024 qualification is actually possible even if we lose to Spain, depending on results. I actually think we're still progressing anyway on Thursday. I think as of Thursday, Euro 2024, Scotland bound.
I think so as well. I mean, the points gap just between, Scotland are on 15, perfect. Spain, 9 points with a game in hand. And then you drop down to Norway on 7 and Georgia on 4. We won't mention how bad Cyprus are, but aside from that, I think it's written in the stars. But moving on to a big one for us in particular, we're playing Croatia on Sunday night. Now, this absolutely petrifies the life out of me.
Your squad
Croatia,
is really scary for no obvious talent. No offense.
exactly.
Whereas
Injury
Croatia have
issues,
completely changed.
they have. They're sort of under a new lease of life, especially for an extremely successful rebuild as well. But
And they're killing teams off. They're not playing for anything. They'll probably play for extra time when they get to the main tournaments, but
100%.
They've actually come out looking to dominate games properly and actually kill teams. You are in very, very big trouble if you do not start well.
I mean, at the end of the day, the only chance that we'll get of actually getting in the top two is if we get all 3 points against Croatia, and we have to win by a 3-goal margin or more. And it's getting real squeaky bum time in this group. I mean, Latvia, we won't mention them, obviously 0 points. We're in 4th on 7. Then we got Armenia and Turkey above. So there's only got 2 on 7 and then the other 2 on 10. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm still not happy with the way things are going. I think that Rob Page, since the World Cup, has ridiculously underachieved with this squad, with his what I'd like to describe as tactical delusion in some games. The Latvia game,
not wrong.
The Latvia game in itself, where we got that victory, pretty much saved his job, in my opinion. Because if we would have even drawn that, who knows if the Welsh FA would have actually sacked him, because that's one thing they don't do is sack managers. But ultimately, it's massive against Croatia. If we get battered, then there's going to be a lot of pressure on everyone. A lot of people aren't going into this game confident. But we have to be pushing for that 3rd position 100%.
If you can get playoffs, then you stand a chance. But I think it's telling when you look at your level of quality. I don't see. What's weird is I've never seen Rabi Matondo in a Wales squad. Pretty much.
Yeah, the reason for that is Page has his favourites, and he will consistently just pick the squad. Like, biggest example, had that friendly against South Korea. We didn't rotate the squad. We played a full-strength squad. What was the meaning of that when you could just risk players for an even bigger game against Latvia?
I know.
Like, that's something that I just don't understand. But main question for you guys is if we don't qualify, does Page get sacked?
Page goes.
I think so.
You can't do much worse
100%.
than Mark Hughes. Mark Hughes is available. You can't do much worse than Rob Page at the minute. Literally anyone is an upgrade. I think I've always maintained my stance that how does a guy go from getting sacked at Northampton Town 6 months into the job, somehow get into the Wales setup in the under-21s and stuff, and then somehow find himself as the national team coach? Okay. It's the blind leading the blind. How do you pick strike players in the last squad that aren't available for the actual qualifying game? How do you end up picking, 4 goalkeepers?
Yeah, 4 goalkeepers.
It's ridiculous. It's not even... Nathan, I've sent you a clip in the group chat, and you will see it maybe after the show is over. And I think that epitomizes Rob Page. So next time we see you, and after Rob Page is inevitably lost, play that clip. We'll play that clip on here because it is very accurate.
Will.
I think he's out of his depth very much so. And do you know what I mean? It's a shame, obviously. It's a bit of a transition with the likes of Bale and co not being there.
I wouldn't even say it's a transition, because if you look at the squads that we've consistently had, there's always been quality in there. Like,
there's always been something. There's always been something.
Exactly. And even now, I still think we do have a lot more than we used to as well. Because back in the day, I remember when Bale and co were just coming through, Bale, Ramsey, Allen, etc. We still had a really strong defensive core throughout. I mean, attacking-wise, midfield-wise, it was a bit thin in places. But now I feel like we're the other way around.
You need
too much
someone
going forward, but not enough at the back.
I think the ideal appointment, and I know Maisie in the comments has said proper dinosaur tactics, but I think at this point you need someone to come in inevitably when Page goes. I'd be very surprised if he stayed. But, obviously Mays I'm using the dinosaur tactics here in this context, but I think that you need someone to come in who can maximize results out of what he's got
Yeah.
to the best effect.
That's
you
not Mark
can't.
Hughes then. That's not
I
Hughes.
would
No,
then.
it's
not
not.
have
I
Mark
mean,
Hughes
it was
back
a
in the
joke.
job.
It was a joke.
No
It was
chance.
partly
There
a
is
joke suggestion and partly maybe a
there is
realistic
one.
suggestion. But
There is
if
one
we're
other
looking
suggestion
properly,
though that there is one other suggestion that Nathan ain't gonna like me saying.
can you
But
say it, please? Bring it to the table.
you're not gonna like this, mate. But I think it could actually be fair. You go back to Coleman.
I would not want him back. Main reason is I was calling for his head after we failed to qualify for Russia.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think his
And I was one
missus
that
was
was
as well.
vocal on it as well.
I think his missus was also calling for his head, but then again, though, she
Do you know
also
what it
contributed
is?
him getting sacked. I think the one thing as well though is maybe you do need something outlandishly experienced. There's one other name that, funnily enough, proper dinosaur tactics. But the crazy thing is, though, is we don't know how it would work international level. When I said the same thing about Steve Clark, you literally done the exact same thing at Kilmarnock. He played defensive, boring football. Now it's more expansive and electric.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Pulis is also there as well, which is mad.
And he's one of the names mentioned as well. I know a lot of people, in particular the hipster side of the Welsh fan base, because you do get the elements of the Swansea fans who work their way in, but not a lot
Would
of
you
them.
take him? Be honest. Would
There's
you
a
take
chance
Tony
I would,
Pulis?
just to see it for a few games.
Who else would you think?
I've always been consistent saying it, but ever since you had the in-betweeners transition between Swansea and Nottingham Forest, the second that he left that Swansea job, I said straight away, go for Steve Cooper.
Yeah.
Poach him, do a Pep Guardiola, give him a date for when he starts. Because in my opinion, he is a Welsh manager waiting to happen. And he, in a transition period, you could say like this, where some players really need to be bedded in, like the way that Gary Speed did back in the early 2010s, helped out by Chris Coleman.
Yeah.
I think he would have been the perfect man for the job. And he will still be. And that seat is waiting for him.
Potentially. Is there any other? Because Wales are not particularly known for, like, similar to like Scotland is generally a Scottish manager. Wales are particularly just a Welsh manager.
Yeah.
I suggested Mark Hughes because I thought that if Page went tomorrow, I thought Mark Hughes, because he's available and he's been in and around before, would be a safe appointment.
He has. I think
that's not suggesting he's a good candidate. That's not suggesting he's a good candidate.
What's crazy though is, and this is another thing as well that people forget, because his last tenure wasn't great as well. There is one mad thing about Mark Hughes that people often forget, but it generally did happen. He played good football with Stoke. Of all clubs, he actually played good football with Stoke.
He had them in ninth.
Could he do something? The second time he actually played them playing attacking football, maybe instead of playing hope for the best. But I don't know. I think
also in the era that he was in as well, and bearing in mind this is what I always call the Millennium Stadium days, the dark days of Welsh football.
The trenches.
Exactly. I mean, he had quality squad at the time: Giggs, Bellamy, Southall, just to name a few. Just some great players in there. I mean, in some positions it was really lacking, but I mean, got that result against Italy at the Millennium Stadium back in 2004. Mm-hmm. But some of the games that he lost, oh good lord, he should have got so much more out of that squad.
Exactly. I think that's interesting.
At the time, there was, in particular from the FAW, was a lot more pessimistic, but with a much more optimistic and more positive outlook from the hierarchy. It could work, but at the same time, it could be a disaster.
I wonder if the Welsh FA would ever consider a non-Welsh manager. You know,
there was murmurings of it, because bearing in mind that they were thinking about employing Ocean Roberts with Mikel Arteta as the assistant.
Yeah.
And that was at the same time that they gave the job for Rob Page. And a lot of these coaches do their badges in Wales because it's much more attractive.
Yeah.
It's a better course. It's a better course.
It is a much better course. So I think the lure is definitely there. It's just the fact that the Welsh national team will always consistently pick a Welsh manager, but there's one that's been touted forever, and that's because of what he's the football, because he's played a lot of football in Wales, that I would not let even close to the national team, and that is Roberto Martinez.
I don't think I just think his stock is higher than Wales at the moment. Not saying it should be, but I mean, do you know what it is? I think even if you brought Chris Coleman back, even if you brought this fire, the Welsh fire, back into this squad, I can still see it going west anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you need is someone fresh. The problem is the best options are in jobs. My two options would have been Cooper or Rob Edwards. Rob Edwards is someone who I've been calling for a long time for Wales.
Yeah.
I think since you've last said to me that Steve Cooper was a Wales manager in the making, which I can't remember how long ago it was, you've effectively
10
added him
minutes
on the
ago.
list. No, I think he said it once to me before.
No, he has done, yeah. I just wanted to
I think
say
he's
10 minutes
tweeted
ago.
it to me before. But you put him on the list for me.
It's
I
true
think
it's true as well with what Liam said as well. Like Trapattoni did do actually okay for Ireland.
True.
He did.
it
There's
depends.
options.
It depends on the context. It
He did
depends
do
on the
well for them.
context of man. No, I don't mean the context of how good Trapattoni did. I mean when you look at the manager's background and pedigree and what they bring to the table. Do you know what I mean? Like for example,
we're not going to say Wales go and employ Didier Deschamps. But what we're
No,
going to
no,
say
no.
though, but what we're going to say though is bring in somebody who actually is familiar with the game. Like here's another one as well. It's actually mad. Holloway, no, I'm only kidding. Nathan's old pal Mick McCarthy.
Oh my god, I would be there no matter what. If
No
that
shit.
happened,
5 centre backs, man. 5 centre backs.
if
That's
that
all right, you
happened,
play five-
I'm
you
getting
play
a
five
Wales
centre-backs
shirt with
there.
McCarthy on the back.
I'm literally going to say that.
That's been clipped, Julio. That's been clipped.
And I will be there no matter what.
The absolute humour of saying it, pledge to McCarthy. McCarthy for Wales.
Oh boy.
Or we'll call it Cameron McCarthy.
See, even Liam would take him back. That's scary. That just says it.
What about? Oh wait, no, he's went back to Northern Ireland. I was going to say Michael O'Neill.
Talk about negative football and a half. Defensive.
But there is virtually, the crazy thing is there's virtually nobody else unless you decide to go back to Ryan Giggs, and we know you don't want that either.
Absolutely
But
not. Even when he was winning matches as the man, I still wanted him out. His style of play was shocking.
Nathan Jones.
We
Another
want
one I would take as manager.
we want Nathan to be happy, not sad. Nathan Jones would end up shit.
He'd be all right.
And I mean, who do you want next? Lamucci? Like we're not going for Cardiff managers.
Super Lamucci. Oh, still can't believe he got sacked. But
Do you know what? I think maybe someone like if Gary O'Neill was still out of work, I actually would think he'd do quite well with Wales. I think he'd have that bit. I think he'd have that because he was almost like it as a player, almost where he'd have that underdog mentality about him, similar to what Rock Page has. But it would be better. It would be more like we're the underdogs, but let's go get them. Not like Rock Page is like we're the underdogs, so let's take 4 goalkeepers and hope all of them are in goal at the same time.
And then let's not even field a whole bench either.
I have another special name. I have another special name for Wales.
If you say Xabi Alonso, I swear to God, like this Xabi Alonso obsession needs to stop.
No, I love Xabi Alonso, even though he played for Liverpool. I love Xabi. He's a great manager. He's a good manager. He'll be amazing. See when he takes the Real Madrid job.
I don't want him to take that job for his career. I'd rather he took the Bayern job or something, or somewhere where he can build.
He'll go Leverkusen, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Spain, and he'll win everything. He'll win everything, guarantee. Xabi Alonso will be a better manager for the rest of his career than Xavi. plain and simple, even though Xavi's ahead of him because he's winning with Barcelona. What I was going to say, though, this is where I'm going to get killed. I'm going to be killed for this one. The new manager of Wales, Michael Beale.
Oh my
Oh
God.
no. And meanwhile, with that, we'll very swiftly move on. Julian Nagelsmann, first game as German manager. Talk me through it, Reece.
You see, it makes sense that first of all, I loved his press conference where he's come out and he said he's got a 10-month contract that goes to the Euros. And if he does well, then rightfully he'll be kept on. First of all, I admire that because that's him already definitively saying, I have 10 months to get these bastards playing football. Additionally, it is quite a negative time for with Germany as well. They need to do a lot better. But getting the big result against France has really at least given a bit of closure, provided they stop picking Kai Havertz. Now, I find it quite telling that Hansi Flick's probably biggest success for Germany was Jamal Musiala and Nikola Füllkrug. Füllkrug wasn't available for his last couple of games, so he had virtually little goal threat. But then after Flick got sacked, Nikola Füllkrug was back in the Dortmund squad and scored. So I find it quite like that loss is really affecting where we know Nagelsmann is going to have that, but he'll have players that are players will go back into the squad, the likes of Leon Goretzka, who's had a very good start to the season, but is not even in the squad. He'll go back in that German team with a breath of fresh air. I think you'll see that as well, where I think Thomas Muller now will realise, even though he is a German legend, he will now realise because his Nagelsmann preferred the younger adopted options, his time will fade out. He'll still be important, but Musiala will now be like that main leader of the 10 role. I think Florian Wirtz as well is going to get more opportunities. I think the likes of players I do not want to see in the squad ever again immediately is Pascal Gross. I don't want to ever see him play for Germany again, even though he's playing well for Brighton. A 32-year-old shouldn't be getting called up now. It's embarrassing. I think I would rather have Mohamed Dahoud in the squad. Same club, funnily enough, but I'd rather have him in the squad because at least he's younger, more dynamic, and he's a box-to-box threat. But when you look at the squad, confident in Germany for the Euros, home soil, generally on home soil they do well, but they need to fix up the defence. They need to iron out what the main defensive line is going to be. One other thing that's important as well for the 10-month period for Nagelsmann is even if he returns, obviously there was a fallout. When he returns from injury, he needs to come out and say who his number one is. If he says it's Ter Stegen who ends up playing Neuer, then he's already went against himself. He needs to come out and categorically say, no, it's not you. It's Ter Stegen's time. He's the goalkeeper. We're running it. I think he needs to stick with the back four, but he has to, for the love of God, do not do a Flick. Even though I thought Flick was going to work, Flick made one mistake. He put Kimmich back at right back. Kimmich has to stay in the midfield. He's the main creative fulcrum of the midfield. He has to stay at that spot. The right back should be Benjamin Heinrichs or Lucas Klostermann. Left back, Gosens needs to go to the bench. It should be David Run. The back two, for me personally, normally I prefer a right foot, left foot option because it gives you that balance of the defence, and Germany are much better suited with a balanced footing of defence. Me personally, my back two is Rudiger and Malik Thiaw. I think Malik Thiaw has been absolutely outstanding since he got into the Milan side for the past year and a half. He's been consistent. I think Schlotterbeck's a good defender, but when he is under pressure, Rudiger is so insistent on going forward as a defender, it leaves Schlotterbeck open, where even though Schlotterbeck is fast, he's been open to those attacks where he's been exposed. And that isn't good from an experienced defender and Rudiger, who should be helping out. If you're going for a young defence, like of centre-backs, Schlotterbeck and Malik Thiaw is right there at 24 and 21, respectfully. So you've already got that. Up front, it has to be Nikola Füllkrug or Timo Werner. Werner's got to come back into the squad. I said it at the World Cup that Germany missed Timo Werner massively. They missed his attacking threat. They missed his pressing, his energy. Werner needs to be Werner needs to be playing. Füllkrug needs to be playing. Gundogan, I know, is the permanent Germany captain. It's not. I thought it was going to be Joshua Kimmich, but he's the vice captain. But I think once Gundogan retires professionally, Kimmich will get the role, as I've always said he would. So we know the midfield is going to be either Kimmich, Goretzka, or Kimmich Gundogan, or Gundogan Goretzka with Kimmich at right back. I'm hoping I do not see Kimmich at right back. I would play Kimmich Gundogan with Jamal Musiala in the 10. The wide men, it's obvious for the moment. It's Sané and Gnabry, who's coming back into form. Sané's in good form at the moment as well. Up front is Werner or Füllkrug. You can rotate, but also in games you can switch out. You can put Werner on the left wing and use his pace, and you can still have Füllkrug on the field where he's got a feeder. Additionally, you have the rotation of Mukoko, like another fantastic player like Adeyemi. I very rarely see Adeyemi getting the squads these days, which is a shame because I think Adeyemi is rapid, but he's also a good finisher. I don't know why Shada from Brentford gets called up. I don't think he's particularly impressive. I think Brandt makes sense. But overall, the one thing that's lacking is the will to press, and they need to consistently press teams. If they can stay in an organised shape and press, then they'll be fine. I think he'll get a win in his first game. I think he'll be fine, but his first selection will be very telling for the 10 months that he says he's going to be in the job, but I still admire the 10 months. And so do I.
That'll be interesting.
But I want to see the Serbia Milan first. Or Spalletti. But Italy with De Zerbi would be fun. But for Nagelsmann, I'm very intrigued to see how he gets on for his first game. I think he'll do fine. I haven't seen not a chance to look at the actual squad yet, so I'm just going to look at the squad and see who's actually been called up. But if there's particular names I see called up, then I'm going to have a riot right here, right now. Especially because the teams in question, USA, then Mexico. Like, I'm looking at it, we'll see. So let's have a look. Who else is in the squad? So there's one name I'm actually quite happy about is Burek. You know, the winger plays for Stuttgart. Mm-hmm. He's got his first call up. He's in the squad. 25 years old, which is even better because it's a young coach. A young player playing with a young coach as well is exciting, which is really good. Just try to find the rest of the squad. Where is it? Where is the rest of the squad? I might need to go on the Twitter page. I don't know. But one thing I don't want to see, I don't want to see Havertz lead the line. Like, that's something I don't want to see ever again because that hurts the German team because Havertz can't. Yeah, he can't do it. You play him as a number 10 or you play him on the right-hand side where he's effective. You don't play him because you can rotate him and Serge Gnabry for different types of wingers, but he shouldn't be leading the line at all. It doesn't work. Let's see, is the squad there at all? Like, all I'm seeing is 5 years ago, Emre Can scored his first goal against Azerbaijan, or Rudiger scored his first goal as well in the same game. Like, I don't care. Oh, they've recapped the Neuhaus goal. I never see him anymore in the squad. That sucks. He's another one I'd really like to have seen in the Germany team, Neuhaus. I really do like him. Oh, Adeyemi's in the under-21 squad. Sick. There it is. So this is the team. Oh, fuck off. Okay, now I can rage. Oh, God almighty. So the full German squad is, for goalkeepers, it's Bowman, Leno, Ter Stegen, Kevin Trapp. 4 goalkeepers. Why? Defenders is Robin Gosens, Mats Hummels, David Raum, Antonio Rudiger, Niklas Schüller, Jonathan Tah, Malik Thiaw. So only 2 fullbacks that are left-sided, no right fullbacks, no Benjamin Heinrichs or anything like that, no Klosterman. The fuck? Midfielders is Andrik, Brandt, Furyk, Goretzka, Pascal Gross, Gundogan, Hoffman, Kimmich, Musiala, Sané, Wirtz, which could mean either it's going to be a back three or Kimmich is going to be a right back. And then the list of attackers is Behrens, who I've just mentioned, Füllkrug, Havertz, Thomas Müller. So again, no Werner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's been fine since his return from injury. This is really not... I get this is his first squad, but some of this really isn't fun. Some of that, I'm like, nah. If he plays a back three, then okay, he's had success for that. But I think he'll play the 4-2-3-1, same system. But they need to show more than just pressure. I want to see them physically press and dominate the ball and actually convert chances. Like against USA, good opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say 2-1 win. Mexico, I haven't watched Mexico play since the World Cup, and they weren't good. But you'd expect Germany to beat Mexico as well. I don't know what you guys think, though, but that's what I'm thinking anyway.
Julio, do you have anything to add?
No. I got nothing to add. I think we've said all that needs to be said regarding the Wales situation, the Germany situation. So it'll be interesting to see how Nagelsmann goes with this German side.
I
really
completely
do.
agree.
Everyone knows what I think of Julian Nagelsmann as much as I like Hansi Flick. Like, I absolutely adore Julian Nagelsmann as a manager. I wanted him as a Man United manager, just like I wanted Hansi Flick. Even with or without Ten Hag, I've always wanted them anyway. But it's, like, I do hope Nagelsmann does well at the job because he's still a good young manager. He's now managed very important clubs in German football. He's now got the top job. This is a big one for him. I really hope he does all right.
Happy days. And on 2 hours, 51 minutes and 10 seconds, we will end the very first episode of the World of Football podcast right here. Reece, where can we find you?
You can find me on Devil's Rising on Twitter. You can find me on the Weekly Steel Chair, where I'm going to be bringing out a lot more content. We're going to be firing into that. And also, you can find me here at the World of Football Podcast channel, and obviously World of Football Pod on Twitter. Get on there. Please share the stream for everyone to see. We will be on Spotify as well. That'll be getting uploaded. Not to worry. And also, please subscribe to our new channel. Thank you, everyone that's watched tonight. It's been a massive pleasure. Thank you for the comments. They've been great. You guys have been amazing. Thanks very much.
Phenomenal stuff. Absolutely. And Julio, where can we find you as well?
You can find me at Julio Lleshi. I think it was on the banner earlier. You can find me on Twitter on that. You can find me here. You can find me on the at Devil's Advocate podcast, which is another podcast I'm a part of. That's how I met Reece, actually.
I'll be there from time to time, but not all the time.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, thank you very much for this evening. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you all who watched for the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. And I hope everyone has a good evening, and hopefully see you all next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because he's hosting. Because he's hosting next week.
It is your turn next week, and aside from that, we will indeed end it here. Have a good week, guys. Enjoy it if you're watching it back on Spotify. Any questions or if you have any suggestions for us, please let us know, as we'll be happy to listen to them. And aside from that, have a good evening, have a good week, and enjoy the football. Au revoir.
Live on YouTube. And listen back on Spotify. This is the World of Football podcast.